Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter and analyst for Buha's Block, and welcome to another live show. On today's episode, we're going to be discussing what is next for the Lakers after making several of their moves official. We had discussed why it made sense for LA to hold off on several moves and them trying to figure out a way to clear some additional cap space, dump some contracts, and get some more flexibility. That has not happened up to this point. It is technically still possible, which I will get into, but the Lakers have officially acquired Walker Kessler. The trade has gone through, and it has gone through as is. It has gone through as it was agreed to. They did not expand the trade. They did not add in a third team, fourth team. They did not loop in Jonathan Kuminga to expand the trade. So the trade goes through as is. Lakers acquire Walker Kessler, send out 2 firsts and 2 first-round swaps. So the natural question is, what is next for the Lakers? They remain on Jonathan Kuminga watch. This is, I guess we're a week into it. It's like day 7, day 8 of Kuminga watch, basically since the Lakers did their first flurry of moves. Now, technically, the Lakers can still create cap space and sign Jonathan Kuminga up until they do the Sexton and Reeves moves, because once they do the Sexton move, they will be going, using the room exception, and then the Austin move fully puts them above the cap, where it's really difficult at that point to create any cap space. So the Lakers still have a window here. They have not officially signed Colin Sexton to the room exception. They have not re-signed Austin Reeves. They have a little bit of time here to see if they can dump some additional salary in the form of Jared Vanderbilt, Dalton Knecht, Jaden Hardy. One note on Hardy. Hardy can still be aggregated in a trade because he was acquired with cap space. So there's been a lot of misinformation out there in terms of Jaden Hardy can't be traded or Jaden Hardy can't be aggregated in a trade. Because the Lakers acquired him using cap space, or had cap space when they acquired him, they can still reroute Jaden Hardy immediately. There's no 60-day period with him. So they can trade him right now. They could trade him tomorrow. Technically, like with how things have played out and with the way that they welcomed him, it just the way the press release was, like it does seem like the Lakers are intent on keeping Jaden Hardy. So I feel like at this point, with the intel that I have and with the way that the market is shaping up right now, it feels like it's going to be them trying to get off Jared Vanderbilt and or Dalton Knecht. Ideally, I think for them both. And then they're probably keeping Jake LaRavia, probably keeping Jaden Hardy, and then Bronny, I think it's TBD depending on where LeBron goes. But technically, the Lakers can still create cap space, and with that cap space, sign somebody, including Jonathan Kuminga, or execute a sign and trade into that cap space. So until they do those final couple moves, that door is cracked open. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. But most likely, with the way things have been trending, with the way things have been developing, the most likely outcome for the Lakers here is my version of moves, which I will pull up here. The most likely outcome for LA is, as we see here, they've already traded DeAndre Ayton to the Wizards. They've signed Quentin Grimes and Mamu. They've acquired Kessler. They've done the first 3 steps. I added an additional step here because of Kevon Looney. But the next steps would be sign Sexton, re-sign Reeves, sign Looney on a vet minimum exception, and then trade for the starting wing. And that could even be a sign and trade. But remember, there are certain salary matching rules that the Lakers would be operating under. So I think this is the most likely way that this is going to play out if the Lakers decide to trade for a starting forward, including Kuminga. I think it will probably be a sign and trade, and it'll just come down to the haggling on both Kuminga's contract and what is the package for Kuminga, what is the draft capital being sent out, who are the players being sent out. And I want to give a big shout out to friend of the show, most frequent guest on the show, Kobe Price of the California Post, who had a huge report today updating the Kuminga situation. And he reported that Atlanta is open to trading Jonathan Kuminga to the Lakers in a sign-in trade, with the framework being Jared Vanderbilt and the Lakers 2032 first round swap. Now, I've heard the Lakers are reluctant to give up that swap and are reluctant to give up that swap in that specific deal. I'm on the side of, I think if you can get off Vando for just a first round swap and retain those 3 second round picks and get a starting level forward back, that to me is a no-brainer. The one caveat here, and I think it's a noteworthy caveat, is that if you are sign and trading for a player, that player or that contract has to be a 3-year deal. Now, technically, only the first year has to be guaranteed. So you could do something like a team option on year 2 or a team option on year 3, player option, whatever. Knowing the Lakers, it's probably going to be a player option, but it would have to be at least a 3-year deal for Kuminga. The max they could do is, well, I guess because it'd be bird rights, I think they could do a 5-year deal because they have not rescinded his rights. So I think realistically it'd probably be a 3-year deal. But only I mean, maybe the Lakers go 4 to just kind of match everyone on the same timeline, but like probably a 3 or 4 year deal. And then I think they would look for some flexibility there where if the salary goes up a bit, I think you maybe look at trying to get Kuminga on a team option there in like year 3 or whatever. If the salary is a little bit lower, that's where maybe you give him the carrot of the player option of, okay, we'll have you a little bit lower for the first couple of years, but we'll give you a player option where if you really pop, you rehab your league-wide value, you really show what you could do in a winning environment, okay, then you have that leverage to test the market, and obviously we can still re-sign you. So I think that framework to me makes a ton of sense from the Lakers side. I'm pretty surprised by it from the Atlanta side. I feel like that's a bad trade for Atlanta, but they apparently are higher on Jared Vanderbilt than most of the rest of the league. And so if that's really the framework, I think the Lakers have to seriously consider that, again, with the caveat that it depends on what the Kuminga deal is. So I will bring up the trade rules here. And I think this is noteworthy because we can look at this framework of if the Lakers are sending out anything in the $8.8 million range or below, they can take back double the salary plus $250,000. So for example, Jaden Hardy is on a $6 million contract. If the Lakers send out just Jaden Hardy, they could take back a player making up to $12.25 million, which would be double his salary plus that $250,000. If the player is making between $8.8 million and $1 to $29 million, they can add up to 9.1 basically million on top of that. So for example, Jared Vanderbilt making 12.4 million. If you send out Vando, you can roughly bring back $21.5 million in a trade. So Vando's technically making like, I think it's like 12,428,000 something. So roughly in that $21.5 million range, which I think is noteworthy because my understanding is Kuminga does want something above that 15 million and probably closer to that 20 million. So I think that's another haggle point here of what is that number going to end up? Is it going to be like if I'm the Lakers, I'm trying to keep that below $15 million, maybe 15 at the most, especially if you're committing to a 3 or 4 year deal, unless you're getting the team option on that. Again, if you're going a little bit higher, I think you have to push for a team option, a non-guarantee, something to give yourself some leverage with the situation just not working out potentially. Because if you're going like 20 million, 3 year, $60 million deal, with a player option on year 3, like there's a ton of risk baked into that contract for the Lakers. And I would understand why they would be a little reticent to give that swap up, even if it means getting off of Vando. So I think this to me it's really going to come down to the structure of that potential sign-in trade with Kuminga and what's that number. I think if you're the Lakers, you're trying to keep it 15 million or below. I mean, 10 million, 12 million would be great. If you go up to 14, 15, I think you could, like, that's mid-level money, a 3-year deal, and maybe even a 2+1 where you have the team option in year 3. That's like a win for the Lakers. If you're going 2+1 with Kuminga player option and you're going above the 15, that's where I start to think it's more of a player friendly contract and fits more with what Kuminga wants. So I think that's the big haggle point right now is like, what's that final number going to be? How many years is it going to be? 3 years, 4 years? Is it a 2+1, 3+1, just 3 years flat, 4 years flat, whatever? There's a ton of variations to that potential contract, but I think that's the big thing right now is going to be like, if I'm the Lakers, and I understand why the Lakers would be hesitant to give up that first round swap. It is technically the last first round pick they could trade for a while. At the on draft day 2028, they will have access to their 2035 pick. So 2027, you get access to 2034. 2028, you get access to 2035. So draft day 2028, the Lakers will have access to that 2035 pick and be able to flip that. So like the notion that I think a lot of people are running with, the Lakers have no tradable first round picks over the next 7 years. That's factually incorrect. They have 3 first round picks that they have access to. Just 2 of those are swaps. So it's a little bit more complicated trading those. And obviously with the Stepien rule, they can't trade those until draft day. And then they have the 2032 pick that they own entirely, but they could do a pick swap with that. And then again, similar with the Stepien rule, because they've traded 2031 and 33, they can't trade that 2032 outside of a swap. But technically, the Lakers will have access to those picks on draft day once they have an idea of where that pick is. And then they could determine whether they want to trade it or not. And then again, also starting in 2028 with that draft, they will have access to the 2035 pick. So it's not 7 straight years of LA not being able to trade any of their picks or not having access to any of these future first round picks. They will get access to the picks that they have, which are 3 on the day of the draft. And that will be post pick swap potentially and figuring out like where their pick is. And then again, starting in 2028, they will start to get access to the future picks where 2028, you get 2035, 2029, you get 2036. So they'll have some more flexibility there with picks and swaps. We are talking 2 years from now, so it is going to be a bit. I'm not denying that. And that 2027 pick is 1 through 4 protected. So unless the Lakers have a disaster season this year and end up in the lottery and get a top 4 pick, which might be nice from like just a draft asset perspective, barring that, they are giving that pick up in 2027. So yes, the Lakers are depleted from an asset perspective. Like overall, they're not the Thunder or the Jazz or one of these teams, but they will have access to first round picks to make to make selections and also trade them. And then they'll also be getting those picks starting within the next couple of years. But I think the big thing here is going to be ultimately what does the Kuminga contract look like? That to me is the biggest remaining factor here of if LA is actually willing to do the deal. Now, a little bit of additional context on the JK situation, to my understanding, is that the Lakers pitched him early on being a part of this next iteration of the team. And behind Austin and behind Walker Kessler, he was right there in terms of a priority for them. But they did end up pivoting toward Quentin Grimes and Mamu and have now circled back and are trying to find a way to make it work with Jonathan Kuminga. But obviously the money's pretty tight. Like right now, they have made the offer for the veteran minimum. He's not going to sign the veteran minimum, even if he is going to be a starter. They've tried to find ways to clear a little bit more cap space and make a more aggressive offer, but it's still somewhere in that single digits or upwards of $10 million. I think it's going to take more than that for him to agree to the sign and trade. Because remember, a sign and trade is not just the team sends you out, you have to agree to it. So Jonathan Kuminga has to be on board with it. And I do think it's probably going to be, I would guess at least a 3-year, $36 million deal, 3-year, $40 million deal would be probably the lowest that would potentially be agreed to. And then it going up from there, where I'm sure he would want 3 years, 60 or something like that with like a player option in year 3. And I think how where those sides settle is at 345, 350, somewhere in between. I think like the baseline versus the highest, like, we'll see in terms of where, if they find common ground or not, and they might not. And the Lakers might just say, hey, we don't feel comfortable giving you a 3-year contract, especially at 15 plus million, 18 plus million, whatever. And so we'll give you a 1-year guarantee or maybe a 2-year guarantee, but we're not guaranteeing the 3rd year, or we are insisting on a team option that 3rd year, right? So there's different ways they could haggle on that. But I think, again, the big thing here is going to be the contract and what the Lakers are are interested in offering, and then what's the lowest Kuminga is willing to accept. And if those two things align, I think this happens. If they don't, then either the price was too high for the Lakers or the price was too low for Kuminga. And I think that's how this ends up playing out. And then final thing before we get into the Q&A is just Kobe also had a nugget in there that I think is notable, in terms of that he reported the price from the Lakers' perspective for PJ Washington is too high, and not even the price of what it would cost to get him, which almost certainly will be higher than what it would cost to get Kuminga, but the actual price of his contract with 4 years and $88 million remaining. And I was surprised by that. And I also vehemently disagree with that assessment from the Lakers' perspective, just because PJ Washington is better than Quentin Grimes and Mamu. And he's also fitting this timeline of the Luka, Austin, and younger group of he's 27. He's about to be 28 in August. So he's a little bit on the older side. He'd be the second oldest rotation guy or second oldest starter behind just Austin. Technically Looney's in there, but we'll see how heavily he actually factors into the rotation. But PJ Washington is on the timeline. He's locked up for 4 years. So he also fits with you're trying to get everyone on the same timeline in terms of like the contracts. Well, you have Austin and Kessler and Grimes and Mamu on 4-year deals. Luka will, potentially sign an extension at some point coming up here in the next year or so. And, that'll be a longer term deal. But otherwise, like you kind of have that core locked up. If you add PJ Washington into that with his 4-year, $88 million deal, like I think that makes a ton of sense. And you would walk out of this offseason with 2 starters and 3 high-level bench guys, with one of those guys in Grimes being able to be a placeholder starter for the time being, and maybe he grows into being a full-time starter. Like the Lakers are on some level making that bet, but I part of me wonders if this is public posturing, right? And you'll see when teams are in negotiations, especially around right now. It's smokescreen season. There's that price is too high. We don't want to give up that for that player, or that price is too low. We're not going to give up that player for that, right? And you see it on both sides with the team, like the team in the Lakers position is going to say, well, we don't want that contract, right? And then the team in Dallas's position is going to be like, well, the Lakers their offer's underwhelming. They're not offering enough. We want the 3 seconds and the swap, even if they would accept less than that, right? So I think there probably is some level of haggling here, and it might not just be an outright no for the Lakers in terms of potentially acquiring PJ Washington. But that, to me, if you can get PJ Washington and it potentially doesn't cost all of your draft capital, I would do that. Like, I think that would be a home run for the offseason. And walking out of the offseason with Kessler, Washington, a potential opening there for the point of attack guy, though, again, that could end up being Grimes long term. And then Austin and Luka, that to me would be like as good of a realistic offseason as the Lakers could have had, factoring in losing LeBron, right? Like, LeBron could right now side for the minimum or whatever with the Lakers if things were in a different place. And that would be an awesome addition on a minimum contract. And like he'd fit, I think, great with this roster. But like barring that, which I don't think was going to happen with obviously with how things played out. And I just didn't see LeBron staying for a minimum. Like if you get PJ Washington locked in as a 4-year guy and he's still in that 27, 28 age range and on the same timeline as Austin and Luka, like, I just think that makes a ton of sense, even if the price is higher than Jonathan Kuminga. I think PJ Washington is a proven commodity, more of a proven commodity on both sides of the ball. You've seen that he can be that primary wing stopper on a team that makes the finals, right? And he was trading that off with Derrick Jones Jr., but Derrick Jones Jr. is more of a point of attack guy. PJ Washington was guarding more of the bigger wings and forwards. And you look at his defensive data, he is elite on that end. So elite might be strong. I'll say somewhere between, like, his numbers are elite or somewhere between great to elite. I would say he's probably a good defender. I wouldn't go as far to say like great or elite, but like I think a good defender, really good rebounder. That's the underrated part to me of PJ Washington, is that especially in comparison with a lot of the guys he's being compared to in that general range of like a starting forward, he's the best rebounder of anyone that has been linked to the Lakers. Like if you're looking at him versus Kuminga, him versus Christian Brown, him versus Cam Johnson, Lou Dort, Max Strus, any of these guys, even Derrick Jones Jr., like PJ Washington is just a straight up better rebounder than any of those guys. So I think that would be an important addition. The shot obviously can come and go, and he's probably closer to being like an average-ish shooter, which you'd like to see that, and bounce back and have like a career year or close to a career year playing off of Luka and Austin. But that aside, I think he's a big game player. I think there's a proof of concept there. I think the defense, the rebounding, the versatility, he can play in small ball looks. He can play in bigger looks. He can play either the 3 or the 4, but I think even in, again, some of those smaller looks, he could go at the 5, or you're going a do at the 5 or something like that. Like there's different ways to use him that I think are really enticing. And my read right now would be that's more posturing than anything. But if the Lakers legitimately are viewing that 4-year, $88 million deal as just too egregious, I would disagree with that assessment. I think it would properly slot a lot of the guys in the rotation, where Grimes would go from being the 4th most important guy to the 5th most important guy. I think that's a far better slotting for Grimes. It would also take some pressure off of him defensively. And again, compared to Kuminga, Kuminga will probably be cheaper in terms of contract and probably be cheaper in terms of draft capital, but there's a ton of uncertainty there. And it is a gamble, that there is some risk there. PJ Washington is a known and proven commodity. So, and he's still young enough where I feel like people talk about him like he's 29, 30, 31. Like he's 27, about to be 28. I would do that in a heartbeat if I'm the Lakers, depending on what the price is. Now, is it the full draft capital? Then you really have to think about that. That is limiting your flexibility in the future. But if you walk out of the offseason with PJ Washington and Walker Kessler as locked-in starters, and then Grimes, Mamu, and Sexton as your top 3 bench players, and over the next year, your goal is to get that final starter, or maybe Grimes grows into that role, and then now you're looking for that final bench piece to replace Grimes. Like, that is a really good place to be in. Whereas right now, I think they're missing at least 1 starter, if not 2. And that's a pretty big hole that maybe they fill with Jonathan Kuminga. Maybe they try to fill on the minimum market. I think that would be a mistake. Matisse Thybulle, Zaire Williams, Ochai Agbaji, those guys I think can potentially be rotation guys on a good team. I do not view any of those guys as starters. And Zaire Williams, they had a $6 million team option. Like, the Nets need talent. If the Nets really viewed him as that type of guy, I don't see why they would decline that team option. Like, you don't let cheap young talent go for nothing. And especially on like a relatively team friendly contract. So like, I think he's more of a minimum level player, and it's just rare to pluck a minimum level player off of the free agent market that a team just gave up on, that desperately needs his skill set and theoretical talent, and like plug that guy in and be like, all right, you're an every night 28, 30 minute and a night starter. Like, I just don't see that. So based on the current intel, like, I think Kuminga is by far the most likely of anybody. We don't even know if PJ Washington, if the Mavericks would trade him to the Lakers, right? It just was notable that was reported that the Lakers aren't interested in it. And again, it could be a hardball negotiation thing, but Kuminga to me is the most likely. It just comes down to the final price in terms of the trade, what the Lakers are sending out. If maybe the Lakers negotiate this where it's like 2 seconds instead of the swap or something. Maybe they value it that way. But then also the biggest thing of all is going to be Kuminga's contract. And is it a 3-year deal, 4-year deal? What's the structure with it? And then what's the AAV? I think if you're the Lakers, it's got to be 15 or lower. If you're Kuminga, you're pushing above 15, trying to get that into the high teens or close to 20. So again, I think that'll be a negotiation that plays out here in the next day or two. And the big thing will be if the Lakers end up doing the Sexton and Reeves signings, then the one way to do this, to bring this back, will be trading for Kuminga with the trade rules. So again, you could do Jared Vanderbilt in the swap for Kuminga on any contract above. I mean, you could even do below Vando's contract, but like basically any number that does not exceed 21.5 million in terms of the single year starting out. So you could do Vando for Kuminga on a 3-year $45 million deal, 3-year $60 million deal. Like there's different variations that would fit, as long as it's under 21.5 in terms of the starting salary for the first year. It would work with Vanderbilt. Now, technically, you could also add in Dalton Connect and expand that. So if you add in Connect, who's making, I believe it's like 4.2 or something in that range. Now you're boosting that to you're almost at nearly 17 million. It might be a little bit more than 4.2. You're almost at 17 million. And now you could still go that 9.1 above. So you could pay Jonathan Kuminga even more. Or if Atlanta wanted to try to add someone, I think you could take someone back as well, though I'm not sure off the top of my head the sign and trade aggregation rules. I would have to look that up. But you're just kind of pointing out some different options for the Lakers. If they wanted to go above that 21.5, I doubt they do. I'm almost certainly positive they will not. But I think the most straightforward thing here would be Vanderbilt plus some form of draft capital. You get Kuminga back. And if you're the Lakers, again, you're trying to keep that as close to a 15 million AAV as possible. And also try to see if you can get a non-guarantee, a team option, something like that. If you're Kuminga, you're fighting to push that above 15 and get the player option. So we'll see how that plays out potentially over the next day or two. If the Lakers do the Sexton and Reeves signings soon here, that means that they will operate above the cap. If they don't and they continue to delay, that means they're potentially looking to get under the cap, create more space, and then potentially just sign Kuminga. Because that would be the most straightforward way. It would be maybe you just dump. You could. I mean, it depends because I think they're in a unique situation here with Vando, where if the price for Vando is just the swap, I don't know if anyone else will take Vando on for just the swap. I'm pretty surprised by how low that price is. So it still might end up being the best situation where you just do the sign and trade rather than trying to dump Vando or dump Hardy and connect and then use the cap space in that case. Like, maybe you can theoretically save maybe you do a second. It's like Dalton, Hardy in a second, and you clear 10 point whatever, and then you sign Kuminga into that. I feel like that's a little low. I don't think he's going to accept that low. I'd be pretty surprised, but that's like maybe the alternate where you save more draft capital and you also clear another roster spot and you just have a little bit more flexibility. But if there's a way to get off Vando and only give up one of your 4 draft assets, I think the Lakers should do that. And I think it's been that difficult of a contract for them to move that if they have a team now who's potentially looking to take it on for whatever reason and is okay with that. And I mean, it makes some sense for Atlanta. Like they, in theory, they're going smaller a bit with some of their, they have a switch heavy scheme. I think Vando can fit into that. And if I'm not mistaken, he has played for Quinn Snyder. I could be wrong on that, but I think his time in Utah might have overlapped with Quinn Snyder. So maybe Quinn Snyder's a fan. I think if the Hawks will take it, I think you have to bite at that. I just think that's too good to pass up based on how cold the Vando market has been and how he still has an extra year. But again, we shall see how this all plays out, and we'll be covering it all until there's a resolution. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A. First, I want to shout out, I am Ryan Bass for being the first person to comment. Shout out to Ryan. Javier, thank you for the super chat. I do not see a question, but I appreciate the super chat. Joey Lucco, thank you for the super chat. Preferred JK, 3 years, 50 million with team option versus 2 year, 20 million with player option, want upside. I can understand that. And I think the issue with that player, like that structure would just be you are potentially empowering him to have a great season and then he walks. Now, the only way that second contract would be possible would be if you create the cap space because of the sign and trade rules. So that's the only thing I will follow up on this with. But I mean, technically you could do a 3-year deal where there's a third you're kind of like, I guess the first contract you're proposing or a third year with a non-guarantee, right? Like I think, I don't know if Kuminga would agree to, I would assume he would not agree to a non-guarantee. I think players of a certain stature or who at least view themselves of a certain stature view a non-guarantee as like disrespectful and a non-negotiable, a non-starter. So I would assume he'd view it that way. I would also assume he would push back on a team option, and that would probably be, because like, I guess if you look at it from like player option is player friendly, nothing is just kind of neutral, and then team option is team friendly. I would assume the Lakers are going to ask for the team option, or theoretically should. I don't know if they will based on their track record. And I don't think Kuminga would go for that. So it probably ends up being a neutral. If I'm the Lakers, though, I have to fight to not give up the player option in year 3. Like it's too many player options. And you're really betting against yourself, because the issue with player options continues to be that if the player's opting in, that probably means they don't have much of a market, especially if it's like a relatively lower number based on their perceived value. If they're opting out, that means they have the market, or that means they've outperformed expectations. And now you either have to pay them and give them a raise, or you just lose them for nothing. I mean, you could work out a sign and trade depending on the situation, but like, it's just not a situation you want to be in. So I think if you're the Lakers, like, team option or non-guarantee would be great. I think that's unlikely, but I'm fighting to not have a player option in that. I think that would be a mistake with the current leverage that they have with the whole situation. I would push back on that. Glenn, thank you for the super chat. You are the best, Jovan. I appreciate that, man. Thank you, Glenn. I appreciate you. Francis, thank you for the super chat. Can we do Vando connect in seconds for Kuzma? With this, we have a starting wing. Get off Vando. Kuminga has more upside, but I feel like he'll be a polarizing figure. Just do not want drama this year. Technically, yes. I would say, I know Kuz will always have a special place in Laker fans' hearts, and he is in a special class of Laker role player because of the rookie season he had, to say nothing of his contributions to the title team in 2020. He is on an expiring, so that is a positive, $20.5 million. So yes, you could just do Vando for Kuz if you wanted to, but sure, Vando and Connect open up an additional roster spot. What I would say here, though, is with him, even with him being an expiring, I would not give up any draft capital for Kuzma. I think he's below that line. Like, I think the current version of Kuzma is more of a bench player than a starter. Like, if you look at this past season, scoring has dipped to his lowest since he was a bench player with the Lakers, the 2019-20 and 2020-21 season. The rebounding has declined, tied for his career low in rebounds, and he's declined defensively. The shot bounced back a little bit, but continues to be below average. He has not been an above average 3-point shooter since 2021. So we're going on 5 straight years of being a below average 3-point shooter. And you look at some of his defensive metrics, and the defensive playmaking numbers have continually declined. You look at, just his numbers are not what they once were. So I think Kuzma 2 or 3 years ago, this is a different conversation. I would if you're getting an asset for Kuzma, that kind of changes how I view it. And obviously you're getting off of Vando here. So in a vacuum, is Kuzma better than Vando? Like, yes. Would I, Vando and Connect, okay, so Connect's an expiring, Vando you get off next year, you save that money, you get that flexibility for next summer. And is Kuzma the best player in the deal? Like, yes. Do I feel good about Kuzma starting against the likes of OKC and San Antonio and Denver and Minnesota and Houston? Like, no. I think he has regressed the last couple of years, and he is not, especially in Milwaukee, he's just not been the same caliber of player. And I don't know if that's because he was just wasting away in Washington or what. I'm not going to speculate, but I think he's very much a fringe starter. And of all, if we're talking Kuminga, we're talking PJ Washington, we're talking Cam Johnson, Lou Dort, Max Strus. I think all these guys are at least a tier, if not a couple tiers above Kyle Kuzma at this point of his career, because he's not giving you the shooting. The rebounding has declined, and I think he's the worst defender of everybody I just mentioned, including Cam Johnson. So I think I personally would be on the side of staying away from Kuzma. Now, if Milwaukee's going to attach some assets, that's a different story. Now, would they attach assets? They have to really love Dalton, because it wouldn't really make sense to attach assets if you're taking on Vando's contract. But if it's just Vando and Connect for Kuzma straight up, you get off the Vando money, you do take on some money. Okay, maybe Kuzma, maybe something about being back in LA rehabs his play. But I would say if you looked at Kuzma last year, he was a fringy starter type that like you look at the scoring and you're all right, 13 points a game. Like that sounds great, but there's far more to it than just the scoring. I'm going to pull up his, just quickly look at some of his other numbers on. Yeah, I mean, like on dunks and threes, EPM, he was in the 46th percentile offensively, 48th percentile defensively, 45th percentile overall. So that is basically rating him as a below average player on both sides of the ball. If you look at the things he does above average, like his true shooting percentage was actually slightly above average, 57th percentile, rim finishing 65%, 58th percentile. Okay. But then it's everything else basically. Defensive rebounding, 62nd percentile, which I guess you take for a wing. It's not great, but not it's solid. Then you get into the defensive playmaking, and yeah, I mean, it's just he's not who he once was, and so I'm probably lower on Kuzma than most, while also acknowledging his contributions to the Lakers and his place in Lakers history. Ryan, thank you for the super chat. Too much smoke for JK, in my opinion. Something else coming. Potentially, right? And I think the PJ Washington note could have been a sign that there is some public posturing, and maybe PJ is the play or someone in that general range. Like we've not heard much on the Lou Dort front with OKC. Max Strus, the Cavs might be trying to get off of him to potentially add LeBron at a higher number. And then DJJ is another one to monitor in terms of where the Clippers are at with him. They're looking like a play-in team at best. So what's the point of having DJJ if he's about to be an unrestricted free agent? I'd be pretty surprised if he finishes his prime in a Clippers uniform. I think he's a competitive guy who's going to want to look elsewhere for a better situation. So I think there's several teams, several options. Denver's still trying to get off money. I mean, they have to get off money, even with the Valanciunas move. I think they're at like $207 million right now in guaranteed salary before signing Peyton Watson. So they're $2 million under the first apron. And I think the second apron starts at around like 222, something like that. So, I mean, they are going to blow past the second apron if they re-sign Peyton Watson. They still need they need to dump like Zeke Naji just by himself with taking back nothing. And I don't know if you're going to be able to do that. He's making like $8 million, or you're going to have to dump Cam Johnson or Christian Brown. So Denver's in a spot where they have to get off some money as well. So I could see something else coming. I think that the big thing here is it's a lot more difficult to pull off the something else once the Lakers finalize the Sexton, Austin, Looney deals, because that's going then above the cap, and above the cap, you still have some flexibility. But remember, the Lakers are now in like the mid 190s in terms of their committed salaries. So they can take back some, but if they take back more than like $5-ish million, I don't know the number off the top of my head, they're going to go past the luxury tax, and then there will be a potential repeater tax down the line. But then you also you're hard capped at the first apron, which is 209. So you have to stay under that 209, and that does give you some flexibility. But for example, if you do the Vando trade, right, and you max Kuminga at 21.5, that's the most you can offer him. You're adding another $9 million. If you sign like another player to a vet minimum, all of a sudden you're now maybe $2 or $3 million under the first apron, depending on the final numbers. So the Lakers, I think, will learn a lot with the Sexton Reeves moves, and that again will limit their flexibility to just trading and staying under the first apron, and ideally staying under the luxury tax. Or if they get off some money, then they can play around in free agency, then do that, then do Sexton, then do Austin, then Looney, and then if they still want to sign someone else, they'll have another vet minimum. So we'll learn more in the next 24 hours. Like they have spaced this out where they did the Grimes and Mamu and Hardy trade yesterday, and I think they were looking to loop someone in and expand the Kessler trade. They weren't able to do that. So now it's okay. Let's see if we can space out the Sexton and Reeves signings and Looney signing to see if we can clear some additional space. And then if not, you move forward. But I mean, I would say, like, I feel like if they could dump salary, they would have dumped it already. Doesn't mean it's not going to happen, but just reading the tea leaves feels like something that would have happened already if they could have. Again, still technically possible, but I feel like it would have likely happened already. Basketball, thank you for the super chat. Rather give ATL the swap to take Vando, attach 1 second to each DK, Jake, Hardy dumps, offer PWAT 28. If matched, pivot to JK, others with spending power. Well, I mean, that could be an option. One thing with Atlanta that they're trying to figure out is they're already at 15 contracts before the whole Kuminga situation or taking on Vando. So that would give them 16 contracts. And then I think they have some flexibility to move some money around and potentially dump somebody. But that's just, you have to look at it from the Atlanta side as well. Now, technically adding Vando and swapping out Kuminga, you still have the same problem where now you have 16 guys where right now Kuminga's more of just a cap hold that they have his rights. But that's something from the Atlanta side that they have to figure out that, yeah, I mean, maybe the Lakers, I mean, I right now, my understanding is the Lakers don't want to give the swap with Vando. So I don't know that they would like to go from getting Kuminga theoretically and not wanting to give the swap to just being like, well, let's take our chances here and give the swap and it not be guaranteed to work out. Because you could do this and then JK could just sign somewhere else, because then he's like, oh, well, you're not prioritizing me again. You could have traded for me, but you didn't. Now I'm going to go elsewhere. And maybe the LeBron sweepstakes plays out, and then he just goes to a different team that misses out on LeBron. So I think there'd be a lot of risk with this approach. And on top of that, I don't know that the Lakers even want to give up the swap just in that framework for Kuminga, let alone not get Kuminga and run the risk of potentially just striking out in the forward market entirely. Because if you look at the current free agent market, if you don't get Watson and you don't get Kuminga, no one else is a starting level player. Like, it's not Thibault, Agbaji, Zaire Williams. I like Spencer Jones. I might even like Spencer Jones more than any of the names I just mentioned, but he's, as of right now, a restricted free agent. I mean, it gets grim. It's a massive drop off. Benedict Mathurin is technically still out there, but the Clippers are in control of his situation. And I guess he's another guy that, depending on how much space you clear, could be in that mix as well. But I think he'll get less than Peyton Watson. But I mean, this is theoretically possible. So if you get off Vando, DK, Jake, and Hardy, yeah, I mean, you're somewhere in that. I don't know if you get quite up to 28, but because the one thing would be whatever cap space you clear, that's the most you could spend. You can't spend over that. So I think it'd be a little under 28. It might be closer to 27, but somewhere in that neighborhood. This is theoretically possible. I just think if you had an opportunity, if Kuminga's already feeling like the Lakers slighted him to some degree and like we're promising, hey, you're a priority and now you're not, but now we still want you, but at a cheaper price. If you then are like, well, we're going to trade, dump Vando, not pursue, not get you in the trade and then go pursue Peyton Watson. I think that might be the nail in the coffin in terms of like Kuminga with the Lakers, which, look, if you get Peyton Watson, I obviously would take Peyton Watson over Kuminga, even with the price difference. But I think this is possible. I would say it's unlikely that the Lakers dump Vando in this manner, but I could be wrong. I could be wrong. So yeah, I guess this is, I mean, if you can find a way to get Peyton Watson, that's, it goes from a home run offseason in terms of like landing the PJ Washington, right? I said it would be a home run. I think landing Peyton Watson instead of PJ Washington takes it to like at least like a 2-run home run, maybe a 3-run, maybe a grand slam. Maybe that's aggressive, but yeah, at least a 2-run home run in my opinion. Shabugan, thank you for the super chat. Why are we keeping Hardy? Rob didn't think there were enough guards on the team. Can he work out a way to get Muggsy out of retirement? My read on keeping Hardy would be threefold. So one, the Lakers are contractually obligated to add a small combo guard every summer. It's just part of just part of how they do business. And I mean, look, I guess you could argue Colin Sexton was supposed to be that guy, but hey, why not add another one? More seriously, I think the second thing would be Luka and the dynamic with Luka, his relationship with Luka. If he's a back end of the bench guy and Luka likes him, they have a rapport, and he does have some upside. I would say he has more upside on a different roster, and that with the Lakers construction, like this is where I always push back when people are like, oh, just add a scoring guard to the bench. I'm like, well, you know, it was more difficult when you had LeBron and you had like those three as the top guys. But even now, with Hardy clearly being a much worse player than Grimes and Sexton, it's like, okay, well, you have Luka, you have Austin, and like those two are in, you know, Luka's in his own stratosphere in terms of like usage and how much he's going to have the ball. Then there's a drop off to Austin, who's going to be in his own stratosphere with usage and the ball. Then there's going to be another drop off to Grimes and Sexton, who are going to have a certain amount of usage in the ball. Then it's a drop off to anybody else. And that's before factoring in the potential inclusion of a Jonathan Kuminga, a PJ Washington, who then those guys go into the Grimes and Sexton range, or, you know, tier of ball handling usage, scoring, shots, all that stuff. So at best, Jaden Hardy, I think realistically will be like the sixth option. And that's not even factoring in like Walker Kessler still is a guy who he just played 5 games, averaged 14 points a game. The season before, averaged 11. So if he's in that DeAndre Ayton role, Kessler will probably be averaging 12 to 14 points, I would assume, at a minimum, if not potentially more. So I would even say like at best, Hardy's like the 7th man, and $6 million for your 7th man who's like a scorer, and we're just talking offense, we're not even talking about like actual role, that just doesn't make sense. Like to me, Hardy's a minimum level player, and the fact that I think the Lakers are overpaying him, and he also just doesn't really fit in the rotation, because I'm saying like 7th at best in the pecking order offensively. Realistically, I don't think he projects in the top 10 in the rotation. So it's not as troublesome as paying Gabe Vincent $12 million. It's not as troublesome as paying Vando $12 million or Maxi Kleber last year, you know, $11-12 million, because those guys were clearly double to triple, overpaid. Hardy's not like to that degree. We're talking more like $3.5 million versus $6 million, which is, I guess, more so double. But it's still, in my opinion, like a bit of an overpay just in terms of his actual contract, to say nothing of his role and slotting on the team. So I don't get it. I think if I were the Lakers, like that would be the most obvious. Like I would probably even trade him over Dalton. Although I guess if JJ's really out on Dalton to the degree that he probably is, maybe you just say, hey, Hardy, keep. And I guess like that brings me to my third point. So, first was the general joke that the Lakers love adding small guards, which has just been an MO for the front office. Second thing would be the Luka dynamic and the rapport and really building a Luka team. Third would be if the Lakers are dumping Dalton Connect or potentially trading out Bronny to whichever team LeBron goes to, or maybe they just dump him in general, then Hardy makes a little bit more sense as like the Dalton or Bronny replacement in terms of just like that spot on the roster. If it's Bronny, it's just replacing him with another guard. If it's Dalton, it's replacing him with that scoring type guard. My issue would be he's making more money than both those guys. So like there's a financial component here. Doesn't really matter as long as the Lakers aren't pushing up against the first apron. But I do think it's like a little bit of a waste of a roster spot and an asset for a guy that, like, if you were asking what the pre Jaden Hardy Lakers rotation was and what they needed, the last thing I would have said was like a 6'3" guard who does not defend and is a shaky finisher inside the arc. Like that's just not the archetype that the Lakers needed. Now, as we've discussed, to be clear, that trade was not about acquiring Jaden Hardy, or if it was like, if that was a factor, it was a smaller factor than getting the $2.1 million in space to fit in the players and the moves that they did under the cap, and also to get those second round picks. So that's the reason they did that trade. I think, obviously they would have rather had someone like Justin Champagnie or whatever, but the Wizards are not giving him up. So the Hardy trade was far more about the finances and the picks than it was Hardy. But the fact that they are, as things stand, not seeming to look to be rerouting him, I mean, I think it's probably more so the last thing, honestly, where they're going to end up getting off of DK and or Bronny. And then at that point, you could argue he makes more sense. Like, is he better than Bronny? Yes. Is he better than Dalton right now? I would also say yes. So like from a talent perspective, I guess you are upgrading. I I don't know where he fits in like a full strength rotation. I don't see him anything more than like the 10th man, and even that might be optimistic. So we'll see. But I know there's been some frustration with the Hardy situation. And look, dude's a bucket. He can score. I just think, again, with there's really no realistic scenario in which he's going to be handling the ball over Luka, over Austin, over Sexton, over Grimes. He's just too low in the pecking order. So if guys are injured, sure, you have that option. But I think the Lakers have greater needs. And like, I'd rather spend $6 million on a defensive wing at like an above minimum price than Hardy. So I do think it's like the last thing they needed was another small scoring guard who couldn't defend. And that's what they added. But again, I want to be clear, like that Ayton trade was more so about the money and the picks rather than Hardy himself. And then Shabugan follows up. The real question to me is whether Rob can figure out a way to get multiple player options to Kuminga. Wild stat here. Wild stat with the Lakers contracts. And this was shout out to Sam Quinn, who found this. The crazy thing is he had 16 of 22. It's actually 17 of 22. 17 of the Lakers' past 22 contracts / extensions have been player options. That is wild. And when you look at the rest, like that's anomalous throughout the league. It's not like there's other teams giving out player options to this degree. Like that has become a real leverage chip for the Lakers in terms of offering, here's a player option. Like, look, I guess that's how they feel like they get some values is they leverage both the Lakers brand and player options to get guys in the door. But there's some real downside to that. Ryan Lucas, shout out to Ryan Lucas. Thank you for the super chat. He's been all over the JK stuff on X. He notes potential major fumble if LA doesn't deliver. And yeah, I mean, we'll see where we'll see how this all plays out. But I mean, I think it depends on the price ultimately, but based on at least the trade framework, I think that's a no-brainer for LA. Then it comes down to the contract. Keon Park, thank you for the super chat. If you sign and trade JK 3+1 more than 2+1, if sign and trade JK 3+1 more than 2+1, then if he doesn't work, better to trade with 2+1 left next summer, 3+1, $60 million. Okay, I'm trying to follow. So if you sign and trade Kuminga 3+1 more than 2+1, that if he doesn't work, better to trade 2+1 left next. I'm a little confused by the wording here, but I think you're arguing that it could be better to give him a longer term deal. And so that 3+1, $60 million is still $15 million AAV. So that would be like the equivalent of a 3-year, $45 million deal. This is a 4-year, $60 million deal. But I think the argument here, if I'm not mistaken, is that if you're trying to get off of it, if he has the player option and it's such a short deal that the team, like the potential suitor might be de-incentivized to take it on because of the risk, and that if he's locked up for longer, it might be more attractive. I'm not sure if I understand what you're saying. So I would love to know a follow-up on this. Sound Automotive Group, thank you for the super chat. Austin Reeves, Colin Sexton, Quentin Grimes, Cam Carr, Luka Doncic, Jonathan Kuminga, PJ Washington, Sandro, Walker Kessler, Sandro Looney. So you're doing the depth chart here. So in this scenario, there's no Adu, there's no DK, Hardy, Laravia, et cetera, or maybe you just didn't list them. And obviously some of those guys like Vando would be going out for Kuminga. Now, I'll say I don't think you can pull off Kuminga and PJ Washington. Now, I guess like technically, if you're only giving up the swap with Vando, you would have 3 seconds left. And I've talked about how like league-wide, a general rule of thumb is that 3 seconds is like roughly equivalent to a first. So maybe that 3 seconds would be enough for PJ Washington. The one thing that you'd have to be careful with is the salary matching at that point and the rule of, okay, so for PJ, you got to go into that plus 8.8, but it would have to be legal depending on how much more money Kuminga's making than Vando. So what I mean by that is if you flip Vando at 12.4 for Kuminga at 15, let's say, you're taking on an additional like $2.5 million roughly. So if you're at 195 or whatever right now, that takes you to 197.5. Then if you're trading, you could take back 9.1, in that second tier of the trade restriction. So PJ Washington is making 19.8. So if you subtract 9.1 from that, that would be 10.7. So you could send out, as long as you're sending out $10.7 million or more, you can take back PJ Washington. But you just got to be careful there, because then you're really pushing up against the first apron. You're still under it, because I guess if you add, to get to 10.7 is a little tricky for them. They don't have quite, I guess, if it's Hardy or LaRavia plus DK, you're in that neighborhood. You might have to add someone else. It might have to be Hardy and LaRavia, and then that's like 12, and then 19.8, so it's like 7.8 difference there. But you clear the $200 million threshold. You start pushing up against like 205 or so, and you're right there against the first apron, which as long as you stay under it, it's fine, but just something of note. So I would say it's possible, but I would say highly unlikely they land both Kuminga and Washington. But obviously if you land both of those, like that would be a home run, and you could start those two guys together. You could start Washington and Grimes with Kuminga as your sixth man. Like you could go a variety of ways with that, but as long as Kuminga's salary is within a certain range, I think it would work technically. It just depends on, does Dallas want to give up PJ Washington for 3 seconds? Daniel, thank you for the super chat. I get the pros for JK, but doesn't he see himself as the guy unless he's ready to buy into being a super role player like Andrew Wiggins / Mikal Bridges? I don't want to give up assets for a new D'Lo. This is the downside. This is the risk with Jonathan Kuminga, and I don't know that we have a clear answer here in terms of just where he's at mentally. Like it sounds like the Lakers pitched him and he was interested. And so I think that would be, or like pitched him on their vision for his fit with this group, how he would fit with the starters, how he would fit around Luka and Austin, and like made it clear that the pecking order is going to be Luka, Austin, Walker, Kessler. And then you're in that, like you're maybe the number 4 guy, but like you're behind those 3 guys at a minimum. And so if he's willing to buy into that vision and lean into the Wiggins, Mikal Bridges, I brought up Aaron Gordon as well, of these former lottery picks who started off on lottery teams and were kind of projected to be all-star number 1 or number 2 options. And they eventually, via years of losing, years of taking their lumps, years of being traded or whatever, eventually got to a place where they're like, okay, I'm not an all-star, I'm a super role player. JJ on his pod back in the day had the Alfreds, and I did a mailbag question about like super Alfreds, where it's like the Alfred is kind of like the elite role player, but like a super Alfred is a guy maybe even better. Like, I would say Wiggins, Bridges, Aaron Gordon, Derek White. It's like that type of player who maybe could even be like an all-star in a certain situation or a certain context, but is buying into being more of a number 3 or number 4 on a team and playing a certain role that they're probably more skilled than to play. They're probably more talented to play that role, but they're buying into that. And I think that is, at least with the current information and sample size we have with Kuminga, that's his trajectory. It's just a question of, does he buy into that trajectory? Because if he wants to be the all-star, all-NBA guy, go-to guy, then I don't think this is the situation for him. I don't think a winning situation is the right one for him. And he should go to Milwaukee. He should go to Brooklyn. He should go to one of these situations and just ball out, put up his numbers, and then I think eventually he'll come around to this realization. But it's the question, right? Because it's a bigger question than the draft capital you give up with Kuminga. With Vando, it's a bigger question than the contract you give up to Kuminga. It's like, where's he at mentally? Is he willing to have games where he starts, plays like 30, 32, 34 minutes and takes like 8 shots? Is he cool with that? It takes 6 shots. But he's going to be asked to go get 7, 8, 9 rebounds. He's going to be asked to go get 2 or 3 stocks. He's going to be asked to switch across multiple positions and be a stopper. Like, is he down with that? I don't know. So, I like, yes, this is the underbelly of the potential transaction. This is the underbelly of the entire situation. I don't have an answer for you. I would say that based on my knowledge of the conversations and like where things have gotten to, I would assume that the Lakers liked the answers that they heard. Otherwise, they would be out on the situation. At the same time, the Lakers obviously talked themselves into DeAndre Ayton, and that was a different situation. It was essentially a 1-year trial run on $8 million. So like very low risk for the Lakers, right? And he outperformed that. Kuminga, it's a little bit more risk. If you're signing a 3-year deal, potentially 15 million range or even maybe higher, there's some risk in that, right? So that, it's a different calculation. And sorry, just checking my phone here. It's a different calculation, and I don't have the answer. If I had the answer, like if I knew he was going to fully buy in, I'd be pushing even harder for it. If I knew he wasn't, I'd obviously be completely off of it. But we don't know. LA824, thank you for the super chat. What do you think about Kessler as stretch walker, 3 points, versus weaker teams to improve spacing and reduce inside the paint injury risk than big walker versus contenders for interior presence? I like this idea. I would say that you can do both against both. And I would actually argue that the stretch big archetype is really important against contenders, and that against, I'd almost say that there's an argument for the inverse here, where I think Walker being able to pop and space as a catch and shoot big against contenders is a really important wrinkle within his game and the Lakers offense. Whereas against the crappier teams, for lack of a better word, that's where he could feast on because take a step back here. Think about when DeAndre Ayton and Jackson Hayes would look like prime Dwight Howard or DeAndre Jordan or Tyson Chandler or whatever. It would be when they were playing the worst teams in the league, and they're playing the Brooklyns, the New Orleans, the Washingtons. Those guys would feast and have their 7-for-7 shooting nights where it's 5 dunks and like 2 putbacks or 2 dump offs or whatever. Those guys look like all-stars and superheroes against the worst defenses in the league because of how bad they were defensively and how easily Luka and Austin were able to get downhill in the pick and roll and then set them up for lobs and easy baskets. So I would actually almost flip this. Like, I like where your head's at. I like the general thesis here, but I would actually probably flip this and say, I like the big walker versus the weaker teams, and I like the stretch walker against the better teams, because what you're going to want to do is stretch out Victor Wembanyama, bring him out from the paint. What you're going to want to do is test Cat's ability to rotate and close out to Kessler and then make the second rotation down to be the low man. What you're going to want is to space out the Thunder and get one of Hartenstein or Chet out of the paint, right? So I actually think against the best teams, the best defenses, having that, if you're playing Minnesota, can you stretch out Gobert? Similar thing with Houston. Can you put Şengün in tough positions where he's got to cover a bunch of ground and potentially close out to Kessler? Like, that's where I think you could actually have a ton of success against some of the better teams with Kessler spacing the floor. And I've been watching a ton of Kessler film. I'm doing my Kessler film breakdown. I did it last year on all the new acquisitions. I'm going to do it for all the new acquisitions, but starting with Kessler. And there is something too, like most of his threes from last year, he made 6, so very small sample size, but 6 in 5 games. I think that's noteworthy. More than 1 per game were of the variety. Like a couple were catch and shoot. A couple, I want to say, I think 3. I think 3 were catch and shoot. 2 were technically like catch the ball, fake a DHO, defense goes with the ball, the guard. Then he's wide open and he just cashes the 3. And then 1 was a pick and pop situation where they just didn't close out to him or were kind of late on the closeout. Might have been 2 pick and pops, but somewhere in that general, like a little bit of pick and popping, a little bit of spotting up, a little bit of fake DHO. Defense doesn't respect him. He just takes the open 3, and he made those. And so I think that's a wrinkle here where, especially with how much attention Luka and Austin command in the pick and roll, if 2 guys go with them and Kessler's wide open, That's a shot in a limited sample size he's shown he could make. But I do think with a fully healthy offseason and with LA trying to bake that into their offense to a degree, that could be a really valuable weapon. So I think he should be able to do both. And that's a way that he will get just playing the DeAndre Ayton, Jackson Hayes role. He'll get a ton of lobs and dump offs and mismatch opportunities, putbacks, etc. But what would take him, I think, to a different level offensively, take the Lakers offense to a different level and really just change how we view him would be fully fleshing out this 3-point shot. And if he just becomes even like a low 30s, but like low to medium volume 3-point shooter, that I think just changes the geometry of the Lakers offense. So I think regardless of if it's weaker teams or better teams, Walker Kessler being able to shoot threes would be a welcome addition to LA's offense. Shibugan, I think of a super chat. If they whiff on Kuminga, what's left? It would be the rest, I think, of the trade. I mean, it's one of two pathways. One is enticing, one is depressing. And the enticing one is you still explore the trade market, the PJ Washington, Derek Jones Jr., Lou Dort, Christian Brown, Cam Johnson, Max Strus, someone like that. You go that route of the guys making somewhere between 10 to 20 million. In the case of Brown and Johnson, a little bit above 20 million, but like I think everyone there is between 10 and a half and like 23 million. So you explore that. Or you take a couple swings on the minimum market. And I just think that if you have this glaring hole in your starting group and you're hoping to plug it with a minimum player, I think that's a mistake. And I just don't think it's going to work, right? Like I could be wrong. It happens, but just look at the Knicks are basically starting 5 plus $20 million guys. And then the Spurs and Thunder, the guys that they were starting that were cheap were guys on rookie scale contracts that were like lottery picks. It's just, there's no, I guess Champagnie is maybe the closest analog here. Like if you find your Julian Champagnie, okay, that's the exception. That's about it. Everyone else, I mean, Chet, J-Dub, Shea, those are all lottery guys. Kayson Wallace, another lottery guy. Caruso, obviously, like if you go back to his roots, but now he's established as one of the best perimeter defenders in the league. And then you look at AJ Mitchell, I guess is another like second round, but like that's a drafted guy who's really popped for you. I guess Champagnie is like the one exception here where you can make that argument, but like the Lakers have needed a Champagnie type, have not been able to identify a Champagnie type for years. So I would say I'm skeptical that they find that guy in the market, but maybe they do. Zink, thank you for the super chat. Glad Rob made Luka happy, but we're locked into this roster for a bit. If our second round exit next year, what's our pitch to Luka next summer to prove we can still contend moving forward? Good point. I think as I laid out at the top, they have a little bit more flexibility than people are indicating, but certainly they don't have like all this flexibility or all this optionality. It is limited. They're limited in terms of what they can trade. That's the biggest thing. I think the point I was more so trying to make was like, I think when people make that point, they're like, oh, the Lakers don't have any of their picks for the next 7 years. That's just not true. They have 3 of their next 7 picks, but 2 of them have been pick swapped and one of them they might pick swap. So that's more so the point, the clarification I'm trying to make. I mean, I think one of the things that has sort of been trickling out there and is now been out there in like multiple forms of reporting is like Luka has signed off on this roster to a degree. So I think this will be another situation kind of similar to what we had at times in the LeBron era where it's like, okay, if the roster doesn't pan out and you're not happy with it, well, you were complicit in the roster looking the way it was and you didn't push back on the Grimes signing or whatever. Right. And I don't think it's not as black and white as that, but like I think there would be a little bit of pushback from the Lakers of like, we got you the center, we moved heaven and earth to get that for you. We got you your buddies and Grimes and Hardy. We got you more shooting and dynamism offensively. Like we tried to do everything we could in our power to give you what you wanted. And we still have some flexibility. We'll have the non-taxpayer MLE. We still have, depending on their draft assets at the time, whatever those are. Like, I guess that would be the Lakers' pitch. In the most drastic sense, you could obviously move on from Rob next summer if the moves just don't pan out. You don't make a move at the deadline, or you don't make an impactful move. You lose in round 1 or round 2. Technically, you could move on from Rob. That's a possibility next summer. But yeah, I mean, I think to my knowledge, Luka's happy with the roster. Obviously, that's been reported as well. So I think it's tough to be like you were happy with it and now you're not happy with it, so you don't want to sign. But obviously, Luka has the power to do whatever he wants, and we'll see how the season plays out. We'll see where he's at next summer. But I think the Lakers still have some flexibility to make changes next summer, to make changes even before next summer, and then obviously can make changes to the front office if it gets to that point. But it's a good question, and I mean, this is more of like a doomsday scenario with how things play out with the Lakers, but it could also be like they could just run into OKC or San Antonio in round 2 and lose, right? Like that's within the realm of possibility here. So yeah, it's an interesting question that I don't have a great answer to, other than I think they'd be like, well, you kind of built the roster, and like, what changes do you want? And then what, do you want changes to the front office? I guess those are like the two things they can pitch him on. Mo Love, thank you for the super chat. T-Not Balmerize Kuminga, no penalty. So I think he's asking if the Lakers can have Jonathan Kuminga fake plant some trees, allegedly. That's a possibility, but I don't think that's going to happen. Zink, thank you for the super chat. If we can get PJ, there's zero reason not to pursue, in my opinion. Why does Rob consistently undervalue defense, positional size, and athleticism? It's one of the things I think the Lakers, I would say one of the flaws or one of the weaknesses of the front office, in my opinion, over the last few years has been, I feel like they sometimes overreact or overcorrect, and you'll see, like, I think the genesis of most of the mess the Lakers have been in has been dating back to the title team on paper not having like a certain level of offense or a certain level of ball handling or whatever. And then they started trying to make up for that, first with the Dennis Schroeder trade, which became an utter disaster, where they gave up Jaden McDaniels, the pick of Jaden McDaniels with Danny Green for Schroeder, when like you had Jaden McDaniels sitting there. Obviously you didn't know he was going to be that, but like that ended up being a very costly trade that they clearly lost. And then from that point on, you pursue a third star that summer. You're going after Dame, you're going after Bradley Beal, you're going after DeMar DeRozan. You end up settling on Russell Westbrook. And then from that point on, I think the Lakers have been, it's been, okay, we have too much roster turnover. Then after 2023, let's re-sign everybody. Let's extend Rui. Let's extend Vando. Let's re-sign D'Lo. And it's like, well, we need to give this group some runway here. So let's basically not make any moves in 2024 either, or make minor moves, Gabe Vincent, Taurean Prince, whatever. And I guess that was partly 2023, but like 2024, they barely did anything that summer. And so I just think that they've kind of had, the pendulum really swings the front office in terms of, we need shooting. All right, we're just going to go get shooting at whatever cost, regardless of like fit or talent or whatever. We need defense. The defense one they have not really prioritized. I guess that would be the one where they maybe need to overreact a little bit more. Obviously they got Kessler, but like perimeter wise, it's been a struggle. So yeah, I mean, I don't, it's just not something they value with perimeter guys or don't value enough, because it's just been a glaring weakness. And I would argue like the closest they've gotten, I would say the four guys that have basically been what they've needed, although not quite to the level they've needed in some form or fashion, either due to age or due to offense or shooting or whatever. I'd say the four guys over the last few years have been Max Christie, Jordan Goodwin, DFS, and Marcus Smart. Now, Max Christie had to give up in the Luka Doncic trade. Okay, that you have to do that. Jordan Goodwin could have kept him, botched that situation, could have tried to get off other money, could have got off Dalton Connect, didn't. Okay, I think you botched that. Marcus Smart, TBD. I would rather have him than Colin Sexton, but okay. Then DFS was the right move. That one, that's the one of the four that they got off at the right time. Obviously, he now had to be attached to 3 second-round picks. Like you nailed that. And those guys had varying issues, right? Like Max is a little bit on the smaller side, was a bit raw, but was developing and really showed some progress that final couple months before he got traded. Jordan Goodwin is just more of a bench player in this mold, not really a starter. And then DFS, Lakers got him at like the very end of his prime / like playability, and he had transitioned into more being like a small ball big. And then Marcus is also kind of on his last legs here over the next year or two. So like Marcus and DFS are basically just too old, not good enough offensively overall. Max needed to be traded in the Luka trade, and then Goodwin, I think they botched that and should have just kept him as like a bench guy. But it's been few and far between in terms of like this general defensive guard wing who has enough offensive utility at like a baseline level to be playable and either be a starter or a key bench guy. They've only had a few of those guys over the last few years, and all of them, Max ended up being a 3-year guy, but like Goodwin, Smart, and DFS, it was all 1-year deals, 1-year situations, and they weren't able to retain those guys. So, it's probably the thing I fundamentally disagree with them the most. They had like the perfect build for this with the 2020 team. They tore it apart slightly 2021. They tore it apart again that next summer, and it's just never been the same. Spurs, thank you for the super chat. Spurs fan, love the show. Was watching Buha's block on OKC Spurs game 1. You mentioned you were worried about Walker Kessler playing in that series. Has your feeling changed, and do you think he could stay in front of Vic? I don't remember that, but I will take your word for that. And that was in the Beyond the Block episode. That was a Beyond the Block episode because obviously it wasn't Lakers. I do have some questions with Kessler hanging with Vic in general, but I have questions with just about everybody hanging with Vic. I don't know that you could guard Vic with a center. I guess Isaiah Hartenstein, Mitchell Robinson, and Cat each had like varying degrees of success with their physicality and strength against Wemby. So I guess I would say Walker Kessler is not as strong as any of those three players. Maybe Cat, but I think Mitchell Robinson and Isaiah Hartenstein are both stronger, or at least play with more like general force and physicality. I would say Robinson's definitely stronger. Hartenstein, maybe it's close, but I think he's a more physical player than Kessler. And then Cat, maybe that's close, but I thought Cat did a solid job when he wasn't in foul trouble against Wemby. I think like Kessler's probably more on like the Chet side of the ledger in terms of some of the matchup issues with Wemby. He's definitely as big, if not bigger from a height perspective, and definitely stronger and more filled out than Chet. But I think right now, I mean, you probably start Kessler on Wemby and see how that goes, but you might have to end up just putting him on Champagne or and having him kind of cheat off and then rotate out. Like we saw them kind of do some of that with Chet. But yeah, I mean, Wemby's a problem unto himself, right? So that's like the exception just throughout the league of I don't love like most centers. Like you need a certain amount of strength and mobility, and Kessler might be able to do it. I think he matched up better with Wemby like earlier in his career. I think we didn't get to see it this past season, so we don't know. But I do think Wemby like leveled up and went to a different level that we'll see. I don't think Kessler's got the quickness to hang with him. He does have the size and he does have the strength, I would say, but the foot speed might be a bit of an issue. But I mean, that's where like you might be in a situation where you're playing like PJ Washington or Jonathan Kuminga. We've seen guys go smaller on him. Like OG had a ton of success against him in the regular season. That might be a way you go with that. But I mean, I don't have concerns with Kessler playing offensively. It's more so, and even defensively, I think if you play a certain scheme and structure a certain way where you're keeping him near the basket, honestly similar to how San Antonio uses Wemby, I think you could have some success there. But him just straight up like guarding Wemby one-on-one, I think that there's a limitation there, but that's a limitation that exists for basically everybody in the league. Like I don't, or most centers. Like I just don't think there's a lot of centers who have the size, but also the speed and athleticism and the strength to match up with Wemby. It's a short list. And I could be underselling Kessler. Like we'll see next year. I think it's difficult to say because we didn't get to see it last year and we just don't know what he looks like against this version of Victor. Joshua, thank you for the super chat. How many playoff rotation players do you see on the team currently? I see 6. We'll be 7 with Kuminga. I think we need 8 to have a chance. I agree with everything you just said. I see 6 currently. I would say 7 if they get Kuminga or PJ. The there's like 2 wild cards, maybe 3. I mean, I think Adu is technically a wild card, but with how his summer league has gone so far, he might be a wild card, and we'll see how the rest of the summer goes. But I look at Cameron Carr and Jake LaRavia as 2 guys who have potential to extend this to 8 or 9, depending on how that goes with each of them. Cameron Carr obviously been really impressed with him to start summer league, and just the off-ball utility, coming off of screens as a pick and roll guy, as a cutter, getting out in transition, like just mainly the off-ball stuff, because I think that's going to be his primary usage. And that's another guy I didn't even mention him compared to Hardy. He'd be ahead of Hardy too, in my opinion. I think Carr has the potential, and then Jake, if he regains his shot, I think has the utility with the defense and the rebounding. But those are ifs. We don't know that for sure. And to count on a rookie in a playoff series is possible, but it's often like the lottery, like there's a reason why Dylan Harper's performance was so special. And not that Carr is going to be held to the Dylan Harper standard, but like in general, rookies, it's more like the Carter Bryant, where you're trying to fit them into a rotation, but they kind of look like they're playing deer in the headlights basketball. They're making mistakes. They're getting pulled quickly. Like that's more the rookie experience. That's also more the rookie experience, I think, with JJ Redick. So, I see 6 right now. I would say so I would say 6. If you're slotting Mamu as the starting 4, like I would say then the starters plus Sexton, those are the 6 guys. And the funny thing is 2 of those guys have not even played in the playoffs, in Kessler and Sexton. Mamu played in the playoffs in 1 series and was bad this past postseason. Grimes has played in the playoffs twice, and I think was kind of shaky this postseason as well. So it's a lot of unproven guys even within those top 6, but I would say right now I see 6. I do agree that if they add Kuminga or Washington, someone of that level, it goes to 7, and then ideally maybe you get to 8 with the internal improvement, right? Again, Carr or LaRavia or Adu, someone like that pops. Okay, that and with LaRavia, it's more so just doing what he did last year, actually playing with confidence and making shots. Then you potentially have 8 or 9, or you go get that guy. I think ideally you go get that guy and slot those guys a little bit lower, and it's like you have a better player in your top 8. Then you have Carr and LaRavia rounding out the top 10, like that. That's it. But yeah, right now I would say if the Lakers are playing a game 1 of the playoffs tomorrow, there'd be 6 guys I'd be comfortable playing, and everyone else would be a giant question mark. Atina, thank you for the super chat. Get Minga, trade for Gaff, sign Max to full MLE next year. Sign me up. I'm on board with this. Depending on I would assume this would be Kuminga signing trade with Vando, and then Gafford is making around 17. So really, again, depends what type of contracts you're sending out. But yeah, if you could do the 1 swap for Kuminga and the 2 or 3 seconds for Gafford, I would do that in a second. And then, yeah, I'm on board with Max. You have Lou Dort. You have Derek Jones Jr. You have Strus. You got multiple guys next summer that are going to be available. I like the name. Jovan needs wings. I do. Did Watson happen? Did I miss that? Trying to stay up to date here. I don't think it did, right? No. Okay. So in general, I mean, I think that would make a ton of sense for the Clippers in terms of, similar to the Lakers pitch. It's like he's an LA guy, UCLA, grew up. I mean, for Lakers, he grew up a Lakers fan. For Clippers, obviously, it's not the same thing, but he makes a ton of sense where if you have, I mean, I don't know how BI really fits into their both short and long term and even medium term, view there. But if you have Garland, you have Wagner, and then Wagler, excuse me, then you add Watson, like that to me makes some sense. And then you could flip BI for something in the future. I like Niederhauser, assuming he bounces back health-wise. And I like some of their pieces, but I still think they're missing, now that they lost Kawhi, they're missing that top-end talent. And to me, Garland and like BI and Garland are probably more of like number 3s for me in terms of slotting. So you could have one guy's the number 3, one guy's the number 4. You still need that 1 and 2. I also view Watson as like ascending into that, maybe for now, like number 4 role, maybe with the upside to be a number 3. But so I guess you have those guys slotted like 3, 4, 5. You still need the 1 and the 2. We'll see how they go about getting that. But I think it would make sense for the Clippers. Like they need young talent, and yeah, I think he's in that mold of what they need. Joshua, thank you for the super chat. Why does Rob seem to negotiate his contracts like he is still an agent? These player options are very stupid. Many have said they paid above market. Yeah, I mean, that was my, like, I've tried to, I will say my initial reaction to the Lakers' entire offseason, outside of Kessler, has been like, I would say relatively underwhelming, but I have come around to each of the moves and like am more seeing the vision, I guess. So like where, you know, the first live I did, the first stream I did reacting compared to now, like I am more optimistic. I am seeing the puzzle pieces fitting together. That said, I think if you look at the market and like the players' production, I think Sexton, I guess, is the one where for as much of a problem as I have with the Sexton signing in the context of like, I just would have rather had Kelly Oubre or Marcus Smart, and would have felt like that made a ton more sense to prioritize perimeter defense over a backup point guard. The Sexton one, okay, $9 million, like it's not egregious. I think if you look at Smart, Kennard, I think they're all kind of in a similar bucket. I do think Smart and Kennard were both better than Sexton last year, but that's neither here nor there. Those guys are older, so maybe that, you know, the market was a little bit lower for those guys. You know, Oubre, I think, was better than Sexton as well. Market a little bit cooler. Those guys are in their 30s. Okay, Sexton gets a little bit more. That one, you know, I think Sexton's maybe more of a $7 million player, $8 million player. Okay, 9, whatever. Grimes and Mamu, I think, were a little bit on the higher side. Now, the thing with Mamu is I get the whole AAV argument if you compare him to other players, but I think the thing that doesn't hold as much weight for me is he signed a 4-year deal. And I look at a guy like Dean Wade. I think we could debate whether Dean Wade is better than Mamu, but Dean Wade got a 4-year, $39 million deal. And so that's overall under 10 AAV. And I don't think, even if you want to argue, like Mamu is, of course, a better offensive player, more skilled. I think Wade is clearly a better defensive player. Now, you could argue that the gap between them is bigger offensively than defensively. I think it's like relatively close in terms of the overall gap between them on each side of the ball. But sure, you could argue that Mamu's offensive advantage is greater than Dean's defensive advantage. But I don't think there's a $13 million overall difference between Dean Wade and Mamu. So I feel like looking at the Dean Wade contract, that to me takes away from, even if you think Mamu's better than Dean Wade, which I think a lot of people that I've talked to think Dean Wade's better than Mamu. Like Mamu should have been 40. I think Mamu should have been 4 years 40 if you're going 4, or 42, maybe 45, 52 on a 4-year deal plus the player option for him. I just think you overpaid there. Grimes is another one that I think a lot of people I talk to are more like he's like a $12 million player, not a 15. I see the Grimes one a little bit more, but you could argue that 40 or 60 for him was a little bit higher. So yeah, I mean, the issue I have primarily with the player options was just that I don't think you got any of those guys on a discount. I know, friend of the show and co-host on Lakers Collective, Trevor Lane, has made this exact argument. It's like you paid those guys at basically, at worst, you paid them at like neutral value. More realistically, you paid them at like surplus value of, you're saying like you're kind of betting on them to hit that mark, and that's not their current value. So it's like if you're overpaying them market price, why are you giving them the player option? Or in Mamu's case, do a 2+1, do a 3-year deal. Why are you doing a 4-year deal and giving him the player option? You're giving him all the leverage there. Like that part, I just feel like the AAV plus the player option, those two, like one of those two things needed to be different. Either no player option, same AAV, or lower AAV, then you give them the player option. But it feels like the Lakers handed all their free agents everything. That's to say nothing of already, like Kessler obviously got more than Utah wanted to pay him. I think it's fair value. I think it's market value, but they obviously paid a ton for Kessler. and they paid the max for Austin. So like every one of their contracts, with the exception of maybe Looney, because he's just a minimum, you could argue like you probably paid more than you wanted to in like a perfect world. And it's one thing, I think Austin and Kessler, like you had to keep Austin. You could not let him leave. You had to go get Kessler. You had to get that center. You had to appease Luka and get him that A-list guy. The rest of the guys, though, like I think there were some alternatives that were potentially cheaper that if they didn't get that guy at that price or on that player option, it wasn't going to be like some massive deal breaker or different offseason. So, yeah, I still think that the contracts that they did pay above market. I'm not the only one to say that, but that was my reaction to the moves in the moment. I also think something that hurt the Lakers was that it came out, and this is sometimes where reporting can hurt the perception of a deal. It came out, I believe it was Mark Stein and Jake Fisher, that Grimes and Mamu were each going to be signed to $10 million deals or in that ballpark. So when you're going to the situation, oh, Grimes at $10 million, I love that. I actually think that's probably a discount. Mamu at $10 million, that's probably around his range. And then you see Mamu at 13, Grimes at 15. It kind of throws the perception, whereas if you had no intel or under like projection for what those guys were going to make, you still might have thought it was a little high, but it was also being compared to, well, they should have been making 10 million according to what the reported deal was. So I think that kind of threw it out of whack too. But I've talked about this enough. I don't really want to talk about the contract values anymore because I've said my piece. I know some people agree, some people don't, but it is what it is. Laker Dodger guy 23, thank you for the super chat. How do we know Dallas wants to trade PJ, or is this speculation? I have a hard time seeing LAL getting him or DJJ. JK is the only realistic option. We don't know that Dallas wants to trade PJ. It's been reported by Mark Stein that I believe it was Mark Stein that reported that PJ and Daniel Gafford, the Mavericks, are open to trading those guys, and that they're looking for a first round pick for either one of them, and that no one has been willing to play ball and give them just an unprotected first for either one of those guys. So that part has been established, that those guys are on the block to a degree with Dallas. Now, in terms of the direct Lakers with those two, that's or at least with PJ, that I cannot like comment or report on that. Like I just haven't heard that behind the scenes. And similar thing with DJJ, right? Like these guys have the ties to Luka. We've seen the Grimes and Hardy, and like there being some interest in reuniting the band to some degree. But as of right now, I think it exists in theory, and I 100% agree with you. JK, I wouldn't say he's the only realistic option, but he's the most realistic option by a decent margin, in my opinion, right now. Degs, thank you for the super chat. Feels like the team is lacking dogs. Enforcer kind of PJ would be him. Would be really a win if we get him. I agree. I think Colin Sexton to me checks that box. I wouldn't say he's not like a Marcus Smart, Dylan Brooks, Isaiah Stewart, like that type of dog, but he's got some of that in him, I think. So I'm looking at Colin Sexton to potentially fill that void. But yeah, I mean, I think I was going to say you could never have enough of those guys. You maybe can if you look at Detroit last year. You might be starting a few fights and getting some suspensions, but I do think they need that DFS Marcus player. And I don't know who that is. Like I think Kevon Looney helps with the veteran locker room presence. Maybe Sexton steps up into that role. But right now, I don't think they have like that type of DFS Marcus defensive leader and locker room leader who's like not the main voice. It's not JJ, it's not Luka, it's not Austin. Like I think all those guys need to do more with the LeBron void and as of now the Marcus void. But sometimes you're kind of the Jared Dudley or whatever. Like sometimes you need that levity in the locker room from a role player, and there are the stars that just command the locker room and are running a tight ship and are dictating everything, whatever. But sometimes I think you need that Marcus, that DFS, that Jared Dudley, that the guy who's going to be and Jared, maybe he's in kind of a different class because he was more of a fringe rotation guy and in more of a back end of the bench guy. But Marcus and DFS were playing like huge roles and leading the defense, and also were like the levity, the loudmouths of the locker room. in a pretty quiet, introverted locker room. So I think the Lakers need that type of personality. I don't know if PJ checks like that box, but I do think PJ checks the enforcer box, and he's a guy who will mix it up a bit. Zinc, thank you for the super chat. Who's realistically offering Kuminga better than 2 years, $30 million this offseason? I feel like he's negotiating against himself a little bit. It's a fair counterpoint. If you look at, I mean, from a cap space perspective, I don't even know if anyone has more than 15 million in cap space left. I could be wrong. I think Charlotte technically is somewhere in that ballpark, but or I forget if it's their trade exception or whatever, but I don't see it. I think the big thing, I guess, would be the role. And so maybe there's teams who can offer similar money, but also a better, more locked in role. They prioritize him more, I guess. But I mean, as of right now, the Lakers cannot offer him 2 years, $30 million. It would have to be a 3+ year deal. So that's the one thing to keep in mind. But yeah, I mean, I think it the Lakers are offering him a big role and potentially the most money, depending on where the number ends up. And now if they're offering him a minimum or they're offering him 8 million, 10 million, there are teams that can match that or beat that. Like there's still multiple teams with their non-taxpayer MLE that could just offer up to 15. So, I think there are several teams that can get to that ballpark, but are they going to get to that ballpark with Kuminga? We shall see. Zindrum, thank you for the super chat. If the signing trade of Vando, DK, and pick swap for JK happens, can the Lakers still try to get DJJ for LaRavia Hardy in the remaining 3 seconds? Yes, they can. So that would be, I mean, that would almost be a dollar for dollar fit. I think, technically, well, actually, no. Sorry, I was thinking of Dalton there. It's LaRavia and Hardy, so that's 12. So the Clippers would be taking on 1.5 million. So maybe the Clippers try to throw someone else in there just to kind of keep the salary, keep it where they're not taking on money, and also keep it where maybe like roster spot wise, it's 2 for 2, something like that. But yeah, you could do something like that for DJJ. King Refa _ Chifa, thank you for the super chat. Pell Suckman, Herb plus Bay for Vando, Jake is perfect. Also, what do you think about Min to Adu and Carr, Magnon and Okariki his last name gives you problems. Got to figure out. I think it's Okariki or Okuriki. I'm not sure. Are interesting future guys too. Yeah. So those two are interesting, and we've talked about last show Magnon potentially being a roster player depending on the direction of the roster. Herb and Bay. So I've been one of the people on Herb Jones Island or the Herb Jones fan club. I think with the current direction of the roster, he's not. I think he would plug the point of attack hole. He would not plug the wing, or he could plug the wing stop. I guess the way you would do it would be, I guess it still works. Like what you would do offensively, it would be Luka at the 1, Austin at the 2, Grimes at the 3, Herb at the 4, Kessler at the 5, and then defensively, Grimes is your point of attack guy, although you could also go Herb depending on the matchup. Herb is your wing stopper, and then Austin's your secondary backcourt guy. Luka is your helper / secondary front court guy, and Kessler's matching. So I guess I've been thinking more of like a big forward because I think that group just needs a little bit more size, a little bit more dynamism, and Herb's more in that 6'6" range, and he's not the level of rebounder that Washington or Kuminga are. But it could still work with just a normal wing size guy who's maybe not this prolific rebounder. And then you add Bay for some bench pop with his scoring and his rebounding and his skill set. Excuse me. I mean, I would do that for sure. And I would prefer Herb to Kuminga overall. I think like the proper slotting with Herb would probably be in the Grimes role and then also getting the Washington or Kuminga, and that being your group of Kessler, Kuminga, Washington, Herb, or Kuminga or Washington, Herb, Austin, Luka. You have a bunch of size. Austin's the smallest guy at 6'5". Everyone else is 6'6", 6'7", or above. You have a certain amount of rebounding, length, athleticism, switchability with the perimeter, but also enough point of attack there with Herb. And then wing stoppers with Herb and PJ, and then Grimes as your sixth man. Like that to me is you're cooking with something there. In terms of minutes right now, I would say Carr. I think if we go with I think right now if the Lakers are playing a game tomorrow, Jake would start and Mamu would be coming off the bench. Because if you start Mamu, the crowd that's pro start Mamu right now, I think is not factoring in that your front court defensive options there are Kessler, Luka, and Mamu, which does not give you, there's no wing stopper in that lineup. There's no, if you're playing Toronto and you got to match up with Scotty Barnes and Kawhi Leonard, if you're playing Orlando and you got to match up with Paolo and Franz, like who's guarding these guys, right? So, I mean, if you're going Luka and Mamu, I just think you're going to get cooked in those matchups. So I think you still need that starting forward. But for now, look, I'm not saying Jake LaRavia is going to stop those guys, but I think he's got a much better chance in terms of his perimeter ISO defense compared to Mamu or Luka. So I think Jake would start. He would take on that wing stopper role, which to me, not good enough to be in that role, but like that's just the makeup of the roster. So I think it would go Kessler, Jake, Grimes, Austin, Luka. Then the primary bench would be Mamu, Sexton. I guess then you go to like Looney and Vando, and then you're kind of in the Carr Adu range. Now, I think Carr has got upside to pass Looney, pass Vando, and maybe be as high as 8 right now in the current pecking order. So I would say like if they're playing a game tomorrow, I could see Carr playing 10 to 12 minutes, and I would say Adu's probably out of the rotation. In terms of like longer term, I could see Carr growing into like a 15 to 20 minute a night role, and Adu probably being somewhere in that like 8 to 12 minute a night range, depending on how he continues to develop. I would say like the version of Adu we've seen in Summer League so far, very small sample size, 2 games, but that's all we can judge the current version of Adu off of. He does not look like a rotation guy, or in my opinion, being close to a rotation guy. I think he still has a ton of development. Carr has looked like a fringe rotation guy and a guy with some real upside on the offensive end that I just think, depending on it, to me, it's just gonna be how he defends and how he fills out physically. But yeah, so I'd say they're both on the fringes of the rotation for right now. If you add in the Kuminga or Washington, that obviously slides Jake lower, and then it's like Mamu, Sexton, Jake, maybe Carr, Looney, something like that. But I think Adu for now, until he, I think, plays a little bit more under control and refines some parts of his games, he's probably on the fringes of the rotation. Shabuk and David Soup Chat, if they could have dumped salary, they would. Assumes that they're willing to give up draft capital to do it. Rob has never shown he'll do that. I mean, that's a fair point that Rob has typically been hesitant or anti giving up draft capital. So that might just be part of it right now. And they obviously have limited draft capital, right? 3 seconds on a swap. So yeah. Drew, thank you for the super chat. I would do Vando and a swap for JK. I would also try to do Jake and Hardy in 3 seconds for DJJ, and obviously move Bronny to where dad signs maybe for a second. I'm on board with all these. I don't know if 3 seconds for DJJ is enough, but yeah, I think the only question here is just the Kuminga contract. But if you could do, I mean, I would prefer Dalton and Hardy because I think the Lakers still need like rotation level guys, and Jake is much more of a rotation level guy than Dalton right now, at least in like a regular season context. So if it was more Dalton and Hardy and 3 seconds for DJJ, then you can go into next season you could actually then start Kessler, JK, DJJ, Austin, Luka, and then your bench is Grimes, Mamu, Sexton, Jake, Cameron Carr, and Looney. And I like that top 11 a lot more. I still think you could upgrade the backup 5 spot, and Jake hopefully shoots better to more like warrant that spot. But that I like that top 10, 11 a lot more than the current group. Cage Brit, thank you for Super Chat. Go to Summer League for the first 2 days. Will you be there? Yes, I will be there. I'm going tomorrow, so going to do Lakers Collective in the morning, then leaving for Vegas. So I'll be out there till at least Monday, if not Tuesday. and considering doing either a meetup on either Saturday or Sunday. I haven't decided yet, but leaning Sunday. Custodian, thank you for the super chat. Second, DK, Jake Hardy for Levert and Sims. That is interesting. I like Sims, and I know he's been a big target on here for a lot of people. I'm looking up Levert's contract. I will put my cards on the table here. I'm not the biggest Karis Levert guy, especially with like the $14.8 million deal expiring. I would say the defense is like if I'm adding another wing type, I want them to be a certain level of defender. And you look at this past season, his numbers dipped across the board, career low in points. His worst or second worst 3-point shooting season in the last few years, worst field goal percentage of his career. I do wonder if at 31 he's a bit cooked. Like, would I rather have Karis Levert than DK, Jake, or Hardy? Sure, in like a vacuum, and you're obviously getting Sims here, but I would say it doesn't, like, he's an upgrade over DK and Hardy for like that general bench scorer role. He's a better player overall than those guys still, I would say, but I do think you lose something with losing Jake's defense, even in like a limited role. And I would like, he's not a starter in my opinion at all. Like he can, like, he's not plugging your wing defense role. Right. So, I'm probably low. Like, to be honest, I think this would be more of getting Sims as the backup, which I can understand, and Levert's an expiring, but if I'm adding another perimeter player into the rotation, I think they have to be at like, ideally like a 70th percentile type defender. And Levert is not that. Bri, thank you for the super chat. When do you think the deal with Kuminga will be done? Well, I would say both sides are on the clock relatively. And so I think we'll have clarity as soon as tomorrow. Maybe it extends to Friday, but I feel like by Friday we should have a pretty concrete idea of like where this is at. And we'll also see what the Lakers do with Sexton and Austin and Looney in terms of those deals, and do they finalize those tomorrow, and then it limits their pathways to Kuminga, but still obviously possible. But I mean, I think they've been talking about it for over a week. The cards are on the table. The cards are not only on the table, but they're out now in the public. Like, I think what's going to happen, it's probably going to be the next day or two. Now, I guess the thing still holding this up to a degree is LeBron, because if you're in on LeBron, or if you're a team that needs a power forward and you're in on LeBron, theoretically you'd be in on Kuminga, because he's probably the now like second best power forward. I mean, I guess it depends how you want to slot Peyton Watson. I think he's more of a, as of now, he's probably more of a 3 than a 4, but sure, like Peyton Watson, all right, he's better than Kuminga, but all right, he's the third best power forward on the market, but Peyton Watson is a restricted free agent. So in terms of unrestricted guys, Kuminga is the second best. And so if you're, if you're Minnesota, if you're Miami, if you're Philly, if you like any of these teams that are in on LeBron and needing a wing or a power forward, theoretically can circle the block and offer Kuminga a similar type role. Now, Minnesota, I think is really interesting, though they can only offer the taxpayer MLE. Philly and Miami, I think the fit is a little bit more limited there. Cleveland apparently reportedly has interest in him, but yeah, I guess he could start at the 3, technically next to Mobley and Allen, have like a jumbo front court. But I would say I would expect there to be some sort of clarity or resolution within the next 48 hours. Like it's possible it extends beyond that, but I think both sides are kind of at the point where like, let's figure this out. Gerald, thank you for the super chat. We couldn't have gotten Cam Whitmore. There's some health stuff with Cam Whitmore, I believe, where let me see what his current. He had the deep vein thrombosis, the DVT in his shoulder, which obviously is unfortunate. But yeah, that, I mean, I would have preferred him to Jaden Hardy, but the Lakers chose the scoring guard. Marcelo, thank you for the super chat. Dalton, Hardy, and LaRavia for PJ Washington work. Yes, that works financially. That's about 16 sending out. Now, the one thing we have to keep in mind here is that any 3-for-1 or even 2-for-1 trades, what's the other team's situation in terms of salary? It's easy for the Lakers side. You just get off a couple of roster spots, but this is Dallas adding a couple of roster spots. So that's just something to keep in mind here. Dallas, for example, just looking at their, I'm going to pull up their cap sheet here. They have right now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 players under contract. And then another player who might be under. So, I mean, they're at a full roster. They can't, they now have to cut guys, move guys around. It does create a problem for them. So I think my read would be they'd probably prefer Dalton and Hardy. That gets them to 15 or something like that, plus the second round picks, or some combination of 2 or 3. Now they previously had Hardy, so I don't know if they'd want to bring him back. Maybe it's Dalton and LaRavia. I don't know, but I think it would be 2 players plus the picks. Malcolm, thank you for the super chat. What kind of trade package would get PJ Washington? I think it's starting with the 3 seconds, and it might be the full emptying of the clip, but I mean, 2 seconds at a minimum. But I think I've made this point. I don't think Dallas and the Lakers are, trading is entirely off the table. But if you're Dallas, the trade has to be universally perceived to be neutral at a minimum, if not in your favor. I don't think Dallas can make a trade where it's potentially in LA's favor. And I think 2 seconds for PJ Washington, most people would be that's it. That's pretty good value in terms, or it's pretty. It's few assets that you gave up for PJ Washington. That's not the best value for him. I think that would be an optics loss for the Mavericks. Maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm open to that, but I just think, again, I don't think Dallas won't trade with the Lakers, but I don't think they'll do some sort of deal where it's you're giving them some major deal, major discount on someone, right? I'd be pretty surprised by that. Jerry Soriano, thank you for the super chat. Hayes back out on Utah may explain Mo Bamba deal. I've not seen or heard that. Is that a thing that's going around? I mean, that'd be great for the Lakers. Nah, I don't think so. Yeah, I mean, it's a really big deal to rescind or to backdoor either a player or a team. That just doesn't happen anymore. It's a death knell to your perception and reputation around the league. So not saying it's not going to happen or not possible, but I'd be pretty surprised. Rich, thank you for the super chat. PJ Herb, Max Christie, what's their trade cost? So Dallas is looking for a first for PJ. New Orleans is looking for 2 firsts for Herb. And I would assume Dallas is, I don't know the exact price, but I would assume somewhere around the neighborhood of a first for Max Christie. So the Lakers have 3 seconds. I think 2 to 3 seconds for any of these guys that gets you in the conversation. And I would be open to that. I think any of those 3, I probably like them most in the order you put them. I go back and I guess the offense and the rebounding tilt me towards PJ, even though I think Herb is a special defender and a better overall defender than PJ. That one's close to me. I did have Herb ahead of PJ in my wing rankings, but with the Lakers' current roster build and no guarantee of finding that point of attack, or that wing guy, Herb can play both roles, but I think you potentially have a point of attack guy in Grimes. I kind of like the idea of PJ a little bit more with the current roster, but you could still argue that Herb, is the better player or the better value. Maybe it depends on how he shoots. I think that's the big thing with Herb, but I think PJ is probably overall the better player. I just think Herb has more utility as both a point of attack and wing stopper, where PJ's more so a wing stopper or even a big defender. They're just two different defensive archetypes. And then Max is more in that Herb mold of being a point of attack, like smaller wing defender. I think Herb is better at guarding bigger guys than Max is, but Max is a better shooter. So I would take any of those three. Charles Mix, thank you for the super chat. Rob really overpaid for AR, didn't prioritize a point of attack defender and finding two capable starting wings. Rob rushed to sign role players. PS 5 guards under 6'5", 3-guard lineup. We cook Laker fans. Like what I'll say here is like on AR, I think at least the first couple of years are in line with his current production / value. I think for him to hit on years 3 and 4, he does have to continue to level up and at least play closer to the level he was at the first month or 2 months of the season. But like AR, I think they could not lose that asset. So once he was getting max offers from other teams, they felt they had to pay him. I think it was more than I thought he was going to make. I think it was more than a lot of fans thought he was going to make, but they could not lose him. The rest of this, it's difficult to disagree. The Lakers continue to add small guards and even Quentin Grimes, like in a point of attack role, I think that's fine. In a wing stopper role, which is currently slotted to play with the current group, I guess it's him and Laravia. Like it's not good enough on the perimeter. I don't know how else to spin it. So yeah, you were not going to plug every hole. So that's like, I guess the pushback here is there was going to be some sort of weakness that you walked away from the offseason feeling. But after landing Kessler, I would have much preferred doubling down. Like, I think the Lakers tried to double down on offense. I would have loved if they doubled down on defense and were like, not only are we getting Kessler, we're going to add some higher level defenders around him to just really make this a tough defense. Because I think you don't need to give Luka and Austin much to make that an elite offense. And I know the Lakers were 10th offensively and I think they've underachieved, but part of that's been health related. And I think if they're fully healthy, like they're going to walk into at least the top 10 offense. They need the top 10 defense. And as constructed, I just don't think it's possible with the current group. So Kuminga or Washington will help if they land one of those guys, but I think they need more. And yeah, I don't really have any pushback to this overall complaint or perspective. Tan Man, thank you for the super chat. Would the Hawks just take Vando for a swap straight up? I don't know. That was a Kobe Price report on the actual negotiation or like where the cost is. I had heard that the swap has been a sticking point. I did not have the full context of I've heard Vando's in the deal and the swap is the sticking point. I didn't know if that was anyone else in the deal. I didn't know if there was this seconds on the table as well. So he reported that out. Big shout out to him. But I don't know. Theoretically, yes, they would if you could rescind the rights to Kuminga or still flip Kuminga somewhere else. But I don't know that for certain. Doc, thank you for the super chat. Recent draft picks have mostly been busts. 10 years ago, they picked well in the late first, second. Clarkson, Nance, Zubats, Hart, Kuzma, Caruso, Thomas Bryant. Is Ryan West's departure responsible? I think that's a part of it. I think the Lakers also went through a period where they did not have a lot of draft picks, right? And they did not have as many cracks or at bats or bites at the apple, whatever you want to say. So I think that's part of it. I would say up until like the Max Christie range, I think they've drafted pretty well. I would say my understanding was the Bus brothers actually more recently, kind of around 2023, being phased into smaller roles and having less of a voice. I think there's been a real at least my understanding of the situation was around or right before the JHS pick. And we've seen since then, the Lakers have not drafted as well with JHS, Maxwell Lewis, Dalton Connect, TBD on Cameron Carr, although he looks pretty good. TBD on Adu. That one's right now kind of still up in the air. So yeah, I think overall, the front office and scouting has gone through some changes over the past decade or so to varying degrees and in varying intervals. I would say it was still a pretty strong track record up until 2022. I would also throw in, Caruso technically was like a Thunder find, but they really found him. And then Austin as well. Like that track record, I think up till that point was strong. And then I would say the last 3 years, starting in 2023 and on, it has been a lot shakier. Nick, thank you for the super chat. Rob needs to get himself some optionality. With limited assets, our moves become telegraphed and puts us in poor negotiating position. Needs options to be able to pivot in the future, avoid tunnel vision. I think this is a really good point, and I like this question or just this perspective, because I think, is there something to like the whole Laker tax situation where no team wants, like, again, I've referenced the Pau Gasol trade, the Luka trade, like there was maybe periods of time where there was some backlash to like, you don't want to be the team that helps the Lakers of they're already, they're bored on third base. They're the Lakers. They're the glamour franchise. They're the franchise of the NBA. They always get the stars. They're always relevant. They're always winning titles. They're always in the finals. You don't want to be the team that's viewed league-wide as like helping facilitate the next Lakers championship. So sure, there's a little bit of a Lakers tax maybe with that. But I think one of the bigger issues for the Lakers the last few years is they have had such limited assets and such obvious needs where they go into every negotiation, in my opinion, or most, at a deficit. And it's like, well, the team's like, because you talk about different guys, you talk about different hypotheticals, but like every time the Lakers call a team, it's pretty obvious what, they need a setter or they need a 3D wing. And now they got the center spot handled, but it's like, if the Lakers are calling you, they're clearly looking for a starting forward or some sort of defensive wing. And they're really, I think, based on like clear roster needs and a limited amount of assets, teams can then demand the moon from them. And that's why sometimes the Lakers price, I think, on the market ends up being a bit higher than like the typical market price. So I just think that's something they've been dealing with now for years. And I don't know really the way out of that is, I think, just building more balanced rosters and also having more assets. And then just look at the contrast of the Lakers have to attack. I mean, and part of this is also the contracts they're signing, but like the Lakers are in a position where they have to, at a minimum, attach an asset, if not multiple assets, to get off Jared Vanderbilt. The Thunder are getting like 2 second-round picks for their guys that they're dumping. And it's just like there's like a leverage negotiation part to all this that other teams have over the Lakers. Not every team, some teams also are in poor positions asset-wise, but I think this is an underrated part of the Lakers' trouble sometimes with getting deals done, is like they're coming at it from it's just a leverage thing where teams can hold that against them. And it's sort of like, if you don't give us exactly what we want and we're asking for the moon here, you're screwed and you're not going to get it. So then the Lakers are in this position of, you either overpay in terms of the trade or you just don't do the trade. And I think more often than not, they've just not done the trade. But then if you don't do the trade, at some point it catches up to you where you just don't have the talent, you don't have the roster. So I think they've been in a tough position for several years here, post Westbrook trade, with just some of the positions they've been in asset wise and sort of roster wise. And they have had some wins, obviously, the Rui trade, the Kennard trade, the DFS trade, of course, the Luka trade first and foremost, but they've also had clear needs that they haven't been able to fill, in part because they've had like bad contracts and they've had not many assets to get off of those contracts. And it's sort of been like a vicious repeating cycle. Lakers Sean, thank you for the super chat. If we can create space, is Kuminga worth it? Seems like he'll play for himself / contract. If he plays well, he definitely leaves to the highest bidder. Again, this is the risk with Kuminga of, you just don't know how bought in he's going to be. You don't know if he's going to have that mercenary mindset of ball out on the Lakers stage, get the spotlight, the audience, the attention, and then go cash out somewhere else. Like, that's a possibility. But for the Lakers, I mean, if he does ball out, if he does buy in, you obviously benefit from that too, in terms of, at least while he's on your roster, like that level of play. So I think he's worth it. From a signing perspective, I think he's worth it, assuming you're not giving up too much to create the space. From a sign and trade perspective, I also think he's worth it, especially if it's just Vando and a swap. But I think that my big question is like, what's the number with his contract? And, you know, if it's 15 or under, I think you have to strongly consider it. If it's over, I start to get a little skittish. Cheesecake, thank you for the super chat. Is there any concern that Pelinka operates like he knows this won't be his problem if this plan fails? P.S. Do you like cheesecake? Let's start with the more fun part of this question. I love cheesecake. It's one of my favorite desserts. And like if I see a slice of New York cheesecake on any dessert menu, I'm almost going to get it every single time. So love cheesecake, big cheesecake guy. In terms of like, maybe I don't, that's not how Rob operates, because he, if anything, is often like not like the way that a GM operates in that position or with that mentality is like, you just empty the clip, go all in and like leave, just dump every asset. He obviously made an aggressive bid for Walker Kessler, but I think even within that, if you're just judging that, like if you want to criticize the Walker Kessler move, I don't think it's the AAV or the contract. I think it's how much you gave up for him on the trade market. And that was obviously a leverage thing with Utah. And they knew how much the Lakers wanted Kessler, how perfect of a fit he'd be, how much Luka wanted that. But to me, if anything, that comes off as more like desperate and trying to save your job than a GM who just doesn't care about his job and is just like, oh, I'm just going to make these moves and see how it plays out, right? So I think if anything, the Kessler move, if you want to be pessimistic or cynical about it, it would be, well, he felt some pressure here and he's like, we have to agree to this no matter what, even if the price goes like above what we're comfortable paying. It's got to be 2 firsts. Like if it's 2 firsts and 2 swaps, we have to do this, right? So I would say that almost came off as more of a desperate trying to extend his job window here type move, because he knew he needed to get a center to appease Luka. I don't think that's the case. I think if anything, it's more job preservation is the way that he's operating right now, or just knowing what was promised to Luka and knowing he had to deliver on that. That led to, again, kind of to the previous point, the Lakers negotiating from a point of, if you're Danny Ainge, you know you're probably not getting Jalen Duren if you're the Lakers, right? Like there was some smoke with that, but I think that was clearly a smokescreen. If you don't get Duren or Kessler, the Lakers' next most likely option was going to be Mitchell Robinson. And if you walk out of this offseason with Mitchell Robinson instead of Walker Kessler, the people who said the Lakers lost this offseason or have had a bad offseason, I mean, imagine the takes flying if the Lakers were going into next season with Mitchell Robinson as your starter. Like it would be, I think, a disaster of an offseason. So they had to do it. But I think it's more so like coming from a place of desperation than a place of like, I don't care or I'm not going to be here, if that makes sense. Doggy Phillips, thank you for super chat. Any thoughts on when, where for Las Vegas meetup yet? Yeah, I'm going to pull up this spot from last year. We went to a brewery last year. So Trevor Lane came out, Raj Chapalu came out, Anthony Irwin came out, Aaron Larsul came out. I obviously was there as well. And I forget the name of the place. So that's what I'm trying to pull up here. I'm finding some blurry photos from last Summer League trip. It was some brewery that I posted about on YouTube last year, and I will post about again, but that was a fun place. It's not too, it's right off the strip, and probably do that on Sunday. So I would say tentatively thinking about like a 1 or 2 p.m. meetup at a brewery near the strip on Sunday, but I will iron out the details and post that tomorrow on the YouTube page, on X, and on the Buha's Block Discord. Zink Thomas, last couple questions here. Thank you for the super chat. If you could get either DJJ or Gafford with the remaining draft capital after Kuminga, which one would you go for? That's a really good question, because I would really like DJJ for slotting Grimes in a 6-man role and balancing out with Kuminga and DJJ. I just really like that 3-4 offensive combination. Obviously, defensively, it's going to be Luka as the 3-4, Kuminga as the 3-4 opposite Luka, and then DJJ more as a backcourt guy with Austin. But I think I would lean DJJ. Like Gafford, what I like about Gafford is then it gives you a high level backup, and I feel really good about the center spot. Like Kessler, I think Gafford's better than Ayton, so I already thought the Lakers had arguably a top 5 center room with Kessler and Ayton, with Ayton being a high level backup. If you slot Gafford in a backup role, that to me is just like a lights out center spot where if Kessler goes down, Gafford slots in as the starting 5, and you have like real insurance there in a way that I don't think you currently have. At the same time, I think sometimes I like to think about like upside and sort of like the upside versus downside risk. And so here you can play out the downside scenario of like, okay, if Kessler has a season-ending injury, Gafford's going to be really valuable. If Austin or Luka has a season-ending injury, like DJJ, he's not really going to replace those guys, right? Like obviously he's maybe more insurance for Grimes or Kuminga or something like that. But that's like, I guess like the downside case. But the upside case is if both guys or either guy in the scenario stays healthy and like the Lakers stay largely healthy, who's going to play the larger role? Who's going to play more minutes? I think it's clearly DJJ. So like DJJ will start and probably be a mid to high 20s guy in the regular season and then up that into low to mid 30s in the playoffs. Whereas Gafford in a regular season context is probably an 18 to 20 minute a night guy. And that's probably even lower in the playoffs. So you could look at the downside scenario where I think Gafford gives you more insurance against losing one of your top 3 players. But the upside scenario of like everyone stays healthy or is at least available come playoff time, I think DJJ has a larger role and more overall utility. So I would say between these two, DJJ, because I would also say that the perimeter defense is still a concern, even if you add Kuminga. Like I see the upside for Kuminga, but it still exists more in theory than in reality. And you don't have an elite defender. You don't have a great defender. You might not even have a good defender out there on the perimeter. Obviously with Kessler, you do. DJJ comes in. He's a good to great perimeter defender, in my opinion. So I would say you could make an argument for Gafford. I would lean DJJ, start him, put Grimes in a 6-man role, and then go DJJ and Kuminga as the 2 starters. DJJ as the point of attack guy, Kuminga as the wing guy, although you could also slot DJJ there depending on the matchups. And I really like that build at that point. Thank you for the super chat. Ideally, the bench would be Sexton, Grimes, Jake, Adu, Carr, Mamu. I only like Looney as a 3rd string. Starters would be AR, Luka, JK, PJ, Kessler. Final opt-out like yesterday and give Magnon a shot. So I'll say for those who've stayed for this part of the show, we're now in the late night hours of 2 hours into it. I could say I've talked to some people down in New Orleans, and they are skeptical that Kevon Looney still has his legs, that he is still a rotation level guy. And for some more context in his season, he did deal with some injuries, particularly in the preseason. But because of their investment in the center spot, in the big man spot, like they invested a ton in Derek Queen, they've invested a ton in Yves Missi, and Zion was healthier than they anticipated. It's like they kind of had a center crunch there. The one hole in that argument, though, is that they also played DeAndre Jordan above Kevon Looney. And DeAndre Jordan has only regressed since his tie with the Lakers. And his tie with the Lakers, he was barely playable that 2021-22 season. So, like, he is just hanging on by a thread in terms of being an NBA player. And New Orleans felt he was a better player, more impactful player, and more playable than Kevon Looney. So I laid out the case in terms of the rebounding, the screening, the defense. If you go to his 2024-25, like there's a massive drop off with Looney from 2024-25 to 2025-26. So I guess the hope, the prayer is that he's more 2024-25 than he is last year. If he's last year's Looney, I legitimately don't think he's a rotation player. I think the thought process is like he gets back to being more who he was 2 years ago. Luka and Austin unlock easy opportunities for him, and he just plays hard, screens, rebounds, whatever. But like the version we saw last year was really, really limited physically and could barely move. And so I've watched some more film on him. I've talked to some more people. It's kind of left me more pessimistic, to be completely honest. But I guess the thread or the shred of optimism I'm still holding on to is who he was 2 years ago. And like, can he get back to being even 60% of that player and still have some utility that way? So that would be my loony take. But I agree. I don't think he should be an every night guy. I think he should be more of a fringe guy. And I guess in this case, you're going Mamu. But yeah, if you can rearrange the rotation to be Sexton, Grimes, I would even, for now, Jake and Carr and Mamu, that's your top 10 in terms of like, those are your 5 primary bench guys to the starters that you're laying out. That would make a ton of sense. Now, JK and PJ, I think is possible. I think DJJ is probably more likely than PJ, only because like there's partly like the salary stuff, and I think his trade value is probably a little bit lower than PJ's. But certainly, if you get PJ or DJJ plus Kuminga, I totally view this offseason differently, and that's at least an A offseason for me. Is he a real one, Veda? Real MC, thank you for super chat. SAS says Rob upset people when he was an agent, and that probably hurts him as a GM. I've heard stories. I think he's upset people as a GM. There was the whole rescinding the Kings trade for the Westbrook trade. There was the rescinding the Mark Williams trade, which really upset the Hornets as well as people around the league. Like, you just don't really do that. Now, they were right on that. There was obviously the stuff with DFS last summer. So yeah, there's been stuff that's upset people, upset specific people or upset broader contingents of people. But yeah, I wasn't as tapped into what he was doing as an agent. There's obviously the famous Carlos Boozer story years ago. I mean, talking over 20 years ago. But aside from that, I don't have as much of the background on him. But I do know, at least as a GM, there's obviously been some things that have ruffled some feathers. And then final one from Sound Automotive Group. Thank you for super chat. Wouldn't need to rely on other teams if we would stop bungling assets. Yeah. Again, I think the Thunder, for totally different situation, and they obviously went through a rebuild and draft accumulation, and they had a once in a generation type trade with the Paul George Shea trade, but they also nailed Isaiah Joe and Aaron Wiggins and signing those guys to those specific deals, and look how they were able to flip them. Whereas the Lakers have often, you just contrast that with Vando and how that Vando deal aged. Like, it's not OKC has their misses. It's not to say they're perfect. They have their misses in the draft. They have their misses with signings. I would say the last 3 or 4 years, they've been pretty bulletproof and pretty close to perfect, but they even have some things you could probably disagree with within that. But that's where the Lakers, I think, have to be better. And that's where those who want to criticize some of the contracts from the summer, you could point to, how will some of those contracts age? They could age great, but there's also some downside. So, yeah, I think that they just got to do a better job with that. And then final one here. Reeves, Strongest Soldier, thank you for the super chat. If Hardy plays, then the trade is a F- in my opinion. First percentile defense. I mean, I talked about this, that Hardy is statistically one of the worst defenders in the league. He's also a pretty bad finisher at the rim. So he his primary utility is actually as a shooter, which I guess you could say, hey, catch and shoot, spot up, just be an off-ball shooter. Okay, maybe he's willing to play that, although he is a guy who likes the ball at his hands. He's more of a ball handler, but the defense is bad. Yeah, I don't think Hardy is a serious rotation player on a good team. I think he's like Washington, sure, go score, go rack up your numbers, but not on a serious team, in my opinion. But I don't want to end the conversation on a negative note, but overall, the Lakers have made several moves official. Quentin Grimes and Mamu have been signed. Walker Kessler has been acquired. Jaden Hardy has been acquired. And now they are on the clock here with finding that starting forward. And we'll see what they do. We'll see if they finalize the Sexton, Reeves, and Looney moves within the next 24 to 48 hours, if they pull the trigger on this potential Jonathan Kuminga trade, or if they surprise us with a PJ Washington, Derrick Jones Jr., or someone else that we haven't even discussed. But shout out to the chat, shout out to the late night gang. Appreciate you all. I will be traveling tomorrow, so unlikely I do anything tomorrow other than Lakers Collective at 10 a.m. We're moving it from 11 a.m. to 10 a.m. But shout out to the chat. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. On the road to 40,000 subscribers by the end of the month would mean the world if you hit that subscribe button. I really appreciate it. And for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back on Friday on here, on Thursday on Lakers Collective. I will talk to you all then.